Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. I hereby call the 2305th meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up, Milwaukie High School Outstanding Student Achievement Award for November 2019, presented to Stevie Pendleton. Please come up.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This is Stephen Pendleton.
Nice to speak with you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
So generally when we start this, I often send out emails to the teachers to ask if they have anything to say about you.
Oh,
and
goodness.
so I got some emails, and I'll give you this. And I got other ones, but I just took these really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to read a couple of things that teachers said about you.
That would be delightful.
So let me get my glasses out. Okay. So Stephen is awesome, always prepared and willing to engage in discussion, fired up to make a positive change in the world, by Richard Alves. Stevie is always one of the most polite people. Every time he comes into the counseling office, before he even says what his needs are, he asks how we're doing. A very warm and welcoming student, Shalea Walters. Stevie was incredibly insightful and energizing in our work for the Positive Masculinity Assembly, an inspiring person, Jillian Moody. And this is from your choir teacher.
I saw the big paragraph, and I was like, Mr. Dolan. That
Yes,
makes sense.
Mr. Dolan. So Stephen has overcome tremendous obstacles to be successful. He doesn't let anything stand in his way from achieving his goals. He is someone of high personal integrity, and he fosters environments where everyone feels welcome, safe, and respected. He builds community and has wonderful leadership qualities. Stephen is very involved in both drama and vocal music at MA. Without prompting, Stephen leads efforts to support our programs. Stephen comes prepared with his lines and notes learned well before his peers. As a result, he frequently leads others in extra rehearsals outside of scheduled class time. He is a gifted actor and singer whose natural stage presence and artful storytelling quickly captivate audiences. There is no question that Stephen excels in most things he pursues. However, I believe his most exceptional quality is that his care for others and the lengths he will go to make others feel welcome. Stephen is one of those rare students who leave a considerable mark wherever he goes. That's from the new choir teacher who's already had such wonderful experiences with Stephen. And the things that I thought about when I thought about you are that you're courageous, you're incredibly fun, you always have a positive attitude, you're talented, you're wise beyond your years, you're very kind and resilient. And I just want to say, as a principal, I'm so honored that I've been able to be part of your life and feel very blessed by that. And so I just want to say thank you. I think you're amazing and just a wonderful human being. Thank you. You've raised a wonderful person. So I just appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'm very lucky to go to a school where you're the principal. Or if I was graced to meet you in any other situation, I'm sure I'd say the same thing.
Thank you very much. So, and Stephen, we had the Rotary today at our school, and Stephen also was the conductor. So not only does, Stephen's just super talented, right? He does take leadership roles. He sings. He's just amazing. I can't say enough about Stephen. Even when he's frustrated or advocating for folks, he understands and tries to understand systems and different things and how things work, and just a really wise human being and just kind. So
I'd say I do okay. Thank you so much.
So Stephen.
All right, thank you. Tell us a little bit about your college plans or your future. What are you thinking about?
So next year, I will be going to a four-year university program where I will either be double majoring in musical theater and secondary education or musical theater and political science. I haven't decided on a college yet, but I've been accepted to Rockford University, and I've applied a few other places, so I'm looking mostly out of state. I'm really excited to just dive into the world of college and get a bachelor's degree, and I'm just really excited to engage in learning more and keep on pursuing further education, because I think you can never stop learning more things about whatever field you're in. Yeah, I'm just elated, very excited for the future.
Cool. Thanks. Who wants to start?
May I?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. I love hearing about how involved you are in the creative arts. I love community theater. I've always been, or for years and years, been involved in that. And so to see young people come up that not only are they using their creative sides, but also all the other, parts of their brain and the kinds of opportunities that school, provides for them. It sounds like you have an absolute stellar reputation with how to embrace people and the various, differences in people, and yet find commonalities, and that's a rare trait to have. So, good luck with that, and as you move forward in life, because I think that'll help you a lot, and no matter where you end up and what you do. But happy to hear that you're so interested in theater too. It's really good.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am also a past theater person. I spent a lot of time in, it was Stage 3 at Battleground High School was the name of our theater program. So I know how rich that can be in your life, and how it does way more than just teach you how to act. There's that camaraderie and community, and the amount of dedication it takes to put on a production is truly incredible. My thoughts are all scattered because mostly what I was thinking as you were speaking, Principal Gelman, was, man, the people you keep bringing to us just make me wish I could go back to high school.
Aren't I lucky? I'm so lucky.
You are lucky, and we're lucky that we get to have this little glimpse every month. I really appreciate it. So in my scattered thoughts, I guess I would ask, what do you see out of your love of theater and your love of community in general as being things that you hope to put out into the world in the future?
So something that I've discovered is very important to me, and something that I've discovered is very important for me to make an impact on, is student advocacy, or advocacy in general, but like student advocacy specifically, and I think that goes hand in hand with theater very well. Currently, I'm on the Oregon Thespians Board. I'm one of 6 student representatives, and so what we do is we organize all of the student events and all of the director events, so the directors of every single thespian troupe in the state. We work to organize all of those, and we work to make sure that all of our students feel advocated for and feel safe with our community. We do a lot of engaging projects, so we hold leadership summit camps, and we get feedback on them on what they need out of our events and what we need out of them in the community, and we plan fundraisers, and we plan workshops. We had one called Advocating for the Arts, and each of them were like board member led, but also led by student board members, and so through this board, not only are we advocating for students, we're teaching them how to advocate for themselves and advocate for others. And I think what I've learned through that experience is something that I want to carry through my entire life and make sure that advocacy is never something that I stop doing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. This is where I have to at least make sure somebody says that we are trying to fill a bunch of positions on our boards at the city level with people who are 16 to 18 years of age, just FYI.
I am heavily interested.
Excellent.
So I'd like to ask you, of all your theatrical outings, what's the favorite role you've ever played?
Oh my goodness. That's so tough. I've got to say, my first show I ever did was The Lion King. I went to an arts magnet middle school, and I had never done any theater before. I was like a strictly choir student, and I did not take any theater classes. I didn't go see productions. I was like, well, I have a concert this Thursday, so it looks like I'm booked. And then the drama teacher came up to me and was like, I really want you to audition and like try it out because you're a very energetic person, and I think that would transfer well onto the stage. And so I auditioned, and I figured that I would like get a chorus role and like play a hyena and have a good time. And I looked at the cast list, and I got cast as Simba for my first role. And that was a big step. I had never performed as an actor before, but I just decided to like dive head into it. And everything about that production, from like the excitement in the students, the excitement in the people who are putting it on, the costumes, the music, the energy, everything about it just translated into something that had so much passion in it for just letting students do theater. Like the amount of love that was put into that production really showed me how much can come out of doing something that you care about. And I think that production kind of changed my life in that way, and I'll always hold that very dear to my heart.
Great, that's a lovely story.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking.
Yeah. I think, the traits that the principal talked about that you have are really, and your obvious energy and engagement are obviously going to stand you well when you go to college. And I was especially taken by the fact of how excited you are to go away and jump into a 4-year college setting. I think for some students that's intimidating, either the going away or the living on campus and jumping into the setting. So I'm really glad that you're excited about that. I was excited about that when I was your age and I did it. And I think that's also a testament to your mom, who I guess that is behind you, that you have the...
Not so excited.
Well, she may not be as excited about that, but it's a testament to her that she's raised you to be so independent and so strong, and so best of luck.
Thank you so much. I really couldn't do any of what I do without my mom. She's so supportive of everything that I do, and I'm just very blessed.
Well, thank you, Mom. You're obviously doing a wonderful job. And Principal Gelman, thank you once again. I think Councilor Heisey said it best. I mean, you're not just bringing to us these wonderful young people, but you're just clearly promoting a kind of leadership on your campus that is it's remarkable. It's I can only speak from my own from my own experience, but it's remarkably different than when I was in high school. And I'm so encouraged by it. You're a wonderful human being, and you're just, the things that you care about are things that that other people see and they relate to, and that's powerful, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's just
She has one.
This has become the meeting at which we all cry, and I'm sorry for that. No, but it really is. I just can't thank you enough, and thank you enough, and thank you enough. And for the culture that you all are creating at our little high school campus is really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate how invested all of you are, in communicating with the high school community and making sure that student voices are heard and that students are recognized from all different platforms. That is something that is so priceless. And I am just so grateful that you guys are doing that, and grateful to you for making sure it happens.
Well, two things. First, do you prefer to be called Stevie or Steven?
Either works.
Okay, just because we've got the plaque made out a certain way, but if it wasn't right, I wanted to at least read it right. Cool. And secondly, you are a striking individual. Your sort of enthusiastic leadership is going to be something we will all desperately need in the coming years. And in case you ever have sort of a crisis of why am I doing this at some point during your theater career in college, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told my son, who also was a musical theater major, when he called me his junior year and said, why am I doing this? There's climate change, there's all these terrible things. Why am I doing theater? And I said, Forrest, human beings have a hard time changing, have a hard time shifting. The way we as a species have always helped communicate change and communicate growth is through the arts. The arts have always led. And because I see you as a natural leader, that aspect of the craft and the art that you're pursuing is critical. It's critical to our future. It's critical to humanity. So stick with it.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me. Thank you.
All right.
I was going to say, you didn't need a Kleenex.
And by the way, this is
why I
what you
stopped
get every day. This isn't like just for tonight. It's like all the time. Just how you are is all the time. This is how you are. It's awesome.
All right. The City of Milwaukie is proud to recognize for outstanding student achievement in academics, civic engagement, and extracurricular activities at Milwaukie High School, Stevie Pendleton. Let it be known to all on this 19th day of November 2019, the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas and in the state of Oregon, recognize this student as an excellent example of the bright future of this community and nation.
Are we?
Yep, you're going to
stand up?
yours. Yes, you can
Thank
stand
you.
up and go get yours.
Thank you guys so much for sticking with me today. I wish I could stick around. I really like watching your meetings. That sounded sarcastic, but I did mean it.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I spread the word how touching this meeting is, you're going to be packed.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather.
Bye.
Bye.
So how are things at the school?
It's been a little crazy, but, it's things like this that make me, it reminds me of like why we do what we do. It's been tough. I think anytime, a lot of schools experience this, but I think particularly when you work in schools that have a high rate of poverty and different things like that, right before the holidays, it gets a little crazy. So November and December have been tough. So I think we're all ready for, nice little rest for a couple weeks and just to reboot. But otherwise, things are really good at the school. Amazing kids, right? Lots of stuff going on. We're on track for the school ends on June 12th, and they want us moving into the building on that day, the day after, so they could move the portables out so we can have a football field by October. We just found out we're getting a new gym floor for basketball gym floor, which is going to be really cool with Mustangs running across it, and it's going to be really neat. If you get to one of our basketball games, we have really strong teams this year. So our girls team, I say we're going to state in a year or two. So we have a really strong young team. And then our boys team is doing really well as well. I will show you a little video, which is, oh, wait a minute.
Scott will help you.
So the video is from November, so we've already had a ton of stuff since then. The building is just amazing. Thank you. So the seniors, or the kids from last year before the final beams went in, they all went out and signed them, and we had them done by grade level. So even since a month ago, there's a ton more that's already been done. I mean, paint's starting to go on the walls. We've had several visitors come, not several, but a couple folks, you all, and then the Rotarians. So, and the next people that I'll probably take through the building will be our seniors, since they've been in portables for 2 years. And then we have, like I just met with some people today, we're going to get a coffee shop in our cafeteria so that our SLCA students, which are our students with developmental disabilities, they can run it and earn money for their program and get some skills so that they can get jobs. And so we're really excited about that. We have a lot of different projects going on now, besides just like a new building. So looking at we're working with Equal Opportunity Schools, which is a nonprofit, to help us look at our AP courses and how many we have, and that kind of thing, and to help develop some more courses. We just got approval to implement Chinese next year, and so kids from other schools that might want to take that course can come over to Milwaukie, which is usually we have to go other places, so we're trying, no, come on over to us, so we're really excited. We've been thinking, what if we offer world languages, and we're a cultural center? I mean, we have all these ideas, right? So we're really excited about that. And the folks that will be teaching Chinese are also going to teach a cultural class around Asian Pacific Islander cultures, which is really nice because we have a growing population of particularly Pacific Islander students. But it'll be nice for all of our students to be able to access that. So, we have a lot going on, and I'm really excited. It's been really hard in the portables to create community, and when it's cold especially, and last year was really long, the cold months. So the idea of being able to move into a building where we have the opportunity to really create more culture and community and cohesiveness, I think we're going in the right direction, but that's going to be huge to what happens in this community with our students and parents, and so I'm very excited about that opportunity and can't wait to get there. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Can't imagine the things you're going to do when you're not in the pods. I mean,
I'm so excited. Oh, the other thing is our kids came to us. We have an equity task force. There's about 18 teachers. There's about 10 students on it. So they want to run and I'm really excited about this. This is their idea. They want to run a form of conference-style platform at the high school for a day where they facilitate breakout sessions, and kids pick the things that they want to do, but they want to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and they want to teach kids how to interrupt any racist, homophobic, sexist, ableist comments and things like that. So Carmen Urbina, who's the chief equity person at the state of Oregon, and a good friend of mine. So she's doing me a favor, which is awesome. I didn't know she would do this, but she's going to come for a day and train 42 of our students in this work that will then be able to work with kids around this work. So really excited about that because I think that'll be really powerful for our kids.
Wow, it's huge.
Super cool.
It's awesome.
And then Anne's going to come crash.
Nice.
Any
Great.
questions?
Thanks for arranging our tour. It was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
It was lovely. I'm
beautiful.
excited for the students to
Oh,
get
yeah.
to see it. Yeah.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
that space really reflects that ethic of wanting to create community in some really, really beautiful ways. I mean, it's the small scale, small groups, big scale. Interaction is just going to be really facilitated
Yes.
by that building. So I'm excited for you all
Yes,
too.
thank you. All right. Well, thank you
you so
all.
much.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day.
Actually, just because she's here, and I know we already talked about it once, but we do have youth openings.
I know, I sent them out to all it's on our social media, by the way.
Perfect. So we have visited all the high schools, and we are looking to have applications come in by February 7th would be really great, so that we can do the interviews and make sure that we get appointments. But thank you for your partnership on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for just providing these opportunities for our kids. They're obviously very capable, and I think listening to them and what they have to say is really changes the world, and so I'm excited that they get those opportunities. So,
We are too.
Yeah.
thank you. All right, have a good night.
You too.
You too.
All right, next up, our Metro Councilor, Christine Lewis. Forget where the full display is. So, if you go like this, you scroll up and down.
Up and down? Yeah.
That's the council.
Cool, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having me here today. I think we have so much going on that I'm going to try and go through the slides, and then hopefully we can have a conversation. But my purpose here today is just to let you know what I'm up to and what Metro's up to. It's been a few months since I've been here, and in the intervening time, we've had the successful passage of our Parks and Nature measure. Our bond renewal will be used to purchase land, restore fish and wildlife habitat, and to complete trails throughout the natural areas system in the region. And so thank you to council. Many of you were active in being champions for our parks, but also thank you to voters. It passed region-wide, but also in Clackamas County at a remarkable margin, 62% just in Clackamas County. So strong showing for the community-driven measure. We put it together after more than a year of community engagement. So there are lots of community groups and natural area advocates and folks in the equity community who were engaged in building the measure, and now will be able to be partners with us in implementing it. And sorry I missed your work session earlier, talking already about some of the plans for the local share, but all sounds right track, and really excited to partner on that. In addition, I wanted to give an update on the affordable housing measure. Again, 2018, the housing bond passed with the promise from Metro to voters for 12,000 people housed at 3,900 permanently affordable homes throughout the region. 1,600 of those homes reserved for folks at very low income. And half of those homes in 2 and 3 bedrooms, so the size that we know folks need to house families. We've sold the bonds, and we have a very favorable bond rating, AAA at Metro, and because of that, our tax rate will be 17%, and that's actually a little bit lower than we had initially anticipated. So we are being good stewards of the public dollar. And meanwhile, we have our IGA with Clackamas County already inked. We voted on that at Metro 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point. So that means our agreement with Clackamas has been voted on by both Metro and Clackamas, and they're able to fully execute their work plan. We have 4 pilot projects that come earlier than the projects that are coming through the IGAs, one of which is in Clackamas County, and that's the Gladstone project. There's a tour of that in the coming weeks, and I'm looking forward to getting ground broken there so that we can actually start to see the results in this community.
And that's an SRO, right?
That's likely the design, yes. Yeah. Uh-oh. I did a bad thing.
Uh-oh.
Scott, help. Next, I'm going to tell you about Southwest Corridor, and there's a picture of a light rail, but you know what that looks like because you have them here. Thank you. Oh, boy. Okay, thanks. I'm going to try not to bump the machine. So the Southwest Corridor, as you know, is our project to extend the MAX down southwest to create reliable, fast transportation option for folks who live in the southwest of our region who currently aren't networked into our light rail system. We do have a draft EIS that's complete with a preferred alternative, and that is extending all the way down to the Bridgeport Village area. The discussions are ongoing about all the funding sources, with a likely source of funding included in the 2020 transportation measure we're talking about at Metro. So this is one of the more significant points in time for our transportation measure work. Thank you to the mayor for serving on our task force, along with 34 other folks from across the region, representing elected bodies as well as business and activist communities. And we have shaped a process that's going to help inform a measure to make sure that we are going to take bold steps for transportation and really make sure that the whole region is working together. In addition to our task force, you know, we had the local investment teams who are out doing the on-the-ground level of study that have helped filter back recommendations to the task force. But the task force will meet tomorrow to start forming their final decision on a recommendation along priority corridors for funding through the measure. So that meeting again is tomorrow, Wednesday, the 18th of December at 5:30 p.m. at the Harmony campus of Clackamas Community College. The next step after the task force makes a recommendation to council is for council to start to hear some public input. And our first public hearing has been scheduled for Monday night, the 13th of January at Metro. So that's hot off the presses as of this afternoon for the next steps in terms of public engagement. In addition to the top tier priority corridors that are going to be under discussion tomorrow and into January, in February, we'll be having deeper conversations about building out the programs. So the programs are the pieces that are going to be funded to go to the area of greatest need, but also that can reach every nook and cranny of the region, even areas not on the priority corridors. There are programs like Safe Routes to School, bus electrification, Main Street projects. Those will start to get built out in February. And in addition, we will have Tier 2 corridors get more in-depth study and review in February as well. In terms of garbage and recycling, we have a couple of updates. With our recycling program, we've coordinated with local governments to develop recycleornot.org. It's a regional resource that we launched over the summer that helps answer the most common recycling questions for everyday recyclers in the region. It's part of a larger strategy that we want to reduce contamination, because when we have contamination in the recycling stream, or when we have people who do wishful recycling, like if I put it in the bin, maybe they'll find a way to recycle it, that just actually devalues the recycling product overall and makes the market harder to balance. I've used it. I actually really enjoy their Instagram, Recycle or Not on Instagram. You can actually see pictures of things that you have in your own house and get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on putting it in your house bin.
I'm following that right now.
Yes. I like heart every single one. And I actually suggested, like, thanks for telling me about the shampoo bottle, but could you tell me about dry shampoo? What do I do about that? The answer was, if it's empty, it can go in a recycling. If it has anything in it, take it to hazardous materials. Interesting. Maybe I shouldn't spray that on my head. Metro is working hard, both with the local level governments, but also the state government, to make sure that industry is involved in long-term planning so that we are doing recycling here in Oregon, particularly as some of the international markets have shut down. In terms of our system investments, we are undertaking an evaluation of the needs and opportunities for our system to expand capacity within garbage and recycling collection. That includes looking at potential updates to the transfer station in the Oregon City transfer station, and even moving some services potentially to a second location. Right now, there's a lot of frustration on all party sides at Metro South and Oregon City, where we have self-haul and commercial actually having to cross paths. We spend a lot of time and effort on good flagging and traffic direction, but that still doesn't resolve frustration on a Saturday afternoon in summer when there are lots of self-hauls. We're also looking at potential for developing our food waste and food scrap processing, both at Metro Central in the near term, but Metro South potentially in the longer term. So those conversations are just beginning. And then finally, there's also a conversation about a West Side transfer facility in Hillsborough and or Cornelius. So system investments writ large for the region are definitely under consideration at Metro. And then finally, just wanted to thank you. You've passed your food scrap policy, and as of right now, I have all of my District 2 Clackamas County cities having passed food scrap policies. But thank you for being a leader on that.
Is there any policy work or advocacy work that Metro-wide could be doing towards reducing, like on the upstream side, manufacturers causing people to think about packaging, think about...
Yeah. On the longer term, we're definitely undertaking more conversations about what we want to remove from the waste stream by removing it at the supply chain. Our most immediate ask that is something we're going to consider either through a state legislative action or something ourselves in the next couple of years is mattress recycling. To either have responsibility lie with the mattress producers to take back mattresses, or to fund the take back of mattresses, to take them apart, find the different pieces that, I mean, there's metals in there, there's all sorts of things that can be recycled. So mattresses is our next kind of bite that we want to take, but we have had conversations at council about what's next after that. We're also having single-use servingware conversations. I think that's going to be a process of engagement over the next year or two. The mattress policy is a little bit more finalized.
Cool.
Yeah, but servingware and mattresses are the two things we're thinking for next steps. Yeah. Wanted to make sure everybody knew about our community placemaking program. It's a grant program that helps people tackle community challenges and opportunities through arts-based and equity-focused projects. And Metro awards, we plan to award up to $190,000 in our next grant cycle. That's above the level of awards we had last year. I helped actually find the budget to raise the fund so that we can actually make sure to be out in more communities. The program grants are going to be due on February 3rd of 2020. And community-based organizations with nonprofit status or individuals who are able to partner with a fiscal sponsor, that would be a 501c3 nonprofit, are all eligible. So folks in community who have ideas for projects about this great place we live should definitely apply. And this is a picture of a funded event from 2 years ago in Lake Oswego. With folks paddling in boats, and take arts-based placemaking as broadly as you want to. I was on the review committee last year, and all sorts of things were proposed, and it's really a great opportunity if there's something that highlights the space and the uniqueness of a community. It's definitely worthy of consideration. So spread the news. An update on the Oregon Zoo. Of course, now is the season of zoo lights, so a lot of people are visiting in the evening all bundled up and drinking hot cocoa. But one of the more significant improvements at the zoo is our new lamprey exhibit. It's actually in partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and also Native American tribes that have helped us get lamprey to the zoo. Pacific lamprey are older than dinosaurs, they're older than trees, 400 million year-old native species. That's particularly important here in the Northwest. You can find them at Willamette Falls, but you can get an up-close and personal visit with that cute face if you visit them at the zoo. So really proud of not only having them and the story they tell about the Northwest, but the partnerships there with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the tribes. And then that's how you can contact me, but I'm happy to take questions or have a more engaged dialogue at this moment.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
It's a really good report.
Thank you.
I had a question, and it may be more for my colleagues who are on the C4, or I don't know if it's for you, but I thought when we got a report on C4 and the priority corridors for Clackamas County, that the one in the north-south route out past Happy Valley, whatever they're calling it, something to Columbia, C to C, got very low ratings, and somehow it seems to have come up higher on the rankings.
Somehow, yeah. So Clackamas, the Clackamas lit, basically their attitude was don't even deal with it. But the Multnomah lit, because it goes through both, I think had it higher ranked. So it's still on there for now.
But it's like ranked above 99E and 82nd and things, right? It's ranked fairly high.
It's not above 99E and 82nd. TV, Highway, 82nd, and 99E are the
Top
three. And in
West
Southwest
Side
Corridor.
Yeah. I was going to say.
That's like in a gold-plated top level. Yeah.
Immovable object.
Yeah, I'd say with C to C, the work that's being done in advocacy is definitely coming from the top 3/4 of the corridor. My colleague who represents Gresham hears a whole lot more about it than I do, even though I've got a quarter of it in my district.
Okay. I was just curious.
Good question.
How involved, so Southwest Corridor, I know, I mean, I've sort of been pinged a couple of times, and I haven't been following nearly as closely as I would like, but just it seems like TriMet is at least engaging in conversations on affordable housing, with the new light rail line, and I'm glad to see that, because that certainly didn't happen when we were planning the Orange Line.
Yeah.
And so, do you have anything to share, just within that conversation, opportunities for us, as sort of, as the test case, as it were, for lessons learned, I suppose. I guess I would say we've got some wisdom here in this community around, making sure that gets done right.
Yeah. And that's a great point to bring up. I'm not on the steering committee. Councilor Dirksen is. The corridor is through his district. But what I can share is that we have taken the approach of planning through a placemaking and placekeeping lens, where in addition to the technical planning along the corridor, particularly Barber has gotten attention through what are the tools that are going to be needed to keep those communities intact as a light rail goes through or adjacent to the community. So that's a partnership between Metro and TriMet that it's something that we're learning from even as we are doing it, but how we're making those investments before the project actually goes in.
Right.
We've got community partners who have started to actually identify not only the conceptual need, but specific parcels of land that may need to be either land banked or just ownership transferred to some sort of deed restricted or just public good for keeping people housed.
Okay.
Yeah. So the process is, I think, the first that's been done this way. So we're definitely open to feedback from, Orange Line, but I think some of what informed us investing in the pre-investments is from the Orange Line, and quite frankly, definitely through the north part of Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Early on in that process, there was a group that came over, electeds and their whole team from that area, and they met with us, and their big two takeaways were, no, there's not more crime, and make sure you do everything you can to preserve the existing affordable housing, because you're going to lose it otherwise.
And I guess I would say that that's something we're taking to heart with the measure. One of the programs that we'd like to layer on is, as we're looking at priority corridors that are getting the most significant investment, how we do that along those corridors, even if it's not a light rail. If we're going to be adding bus rapid and these significant improvements, what do we need to do about the land use adjacent to them affordable home ownership. And frankly, we're also very much thinking about protecting small businesses that, you've experienced it in your downtown. I've, had conversations with folks who have left their downtown business, but what can we do to stabilize businesses as well?
Right.
Great.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very
I
much.
always appreciate the partnership from this council, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Shockingly, we have no
No
consent
consent agenda. I don't remember
think
when that last.
First time ever in my time on council. All right. Audience participation. There is some. Okay. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community member statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out a yellow speaker registration card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during the public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, are there any follow-up reports from the December 3rd audience participation, Ms. Ober?
There are not. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let's start with Chris. Okay.
May I ask Scott, have you provided copies of my public comment to the councilors?
Yes.
And there are copies on the,
Okay, great. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it. So if you want to grab your copy.
So for starters, name and city for the record, both of you, please.
Chris.
Yes, we'll do 6 minutes.
Chris Ortolano, 11088 Southeast 40th Avenue, Milwaukie.
Renelle Coburn, I'm on Southeast 29th between Malcolm and Boyd and Ardenwald.
Thank you.
So I'm going to sort of start with the meta message, which is that we're hoping to achieve a win-win-win with regards to the proposed land use application at Monroe Street with regards to the Monroe Greenway. And I just want to call to your attention the first page of my public comment, which does have an executive summary signed by 6 people, and there's supporting documentation behind that. I'm not going to read that to you, because I trust you will take a few minutes of your time, so I can spend a little bit more time talking about win-win scenarios. So last night, I spoke with Senior Planner David Levitin at CPAC meeting number 19. A few of you were there. And I proposed that he and I collaborate on an executive summary document for the comp plan update for the community. Now, this is an atypical request. Normally, that's not done. However, we, as community leaders, feel like that could be beneficial to help to normalize some of the comments and increase public engagement. David gave me a verbal yes. That was a win-win. 3 weeks ago, I met with Layla Aman at the South Downtown Plaza celebration. We agreed to keep an open channel of communication and find ways to collaborate moving forward. Also a win-win. 6 months ago, I made a presentation to the Planning Commission here in this room with regards to a height variance request for the Monroe Street apartment complex, which is the purpose of my public comment here today, which I submitted to Vera on Monday. As you may know, the public comment period for this Type 2 multifamily housing project has been extended through Monday, December 23rd through noon that day. We also think that's a win-win because it gives our community members more time to evaluate this rather complex project. My first question for council this evening is how can we achieve a win-win-win for the city, for the developer, and for the community with regards to this rather complex situation? I have a few ideas. So far, over 20 people, including 3 NDAs, 2 community groups, have submitted their public comments. Very few people are opposed to the development project. Almost everyone is very concerned about the impacts of this proposed development on the Monroe Street Greenway. I can assure you that Bike Milwaukie and Milwaukie RIP have been working very closely with the planning department to provide a viable solution to this complex problem so that we can all realize a win-win-win solution. But to realize this solution would require a system that is oriented around collaboration and consensus, not a system that is oriented around hierarchy and silos. At this point in time, I would like to hazard a guess that we are between 60 and 70% towards realizing a compromise solution. And that is fairly significant, in my opinion. We've spent 6 months working to realize about 2/3 of a compromise goal. However, we have less than 10 days before the planning director will submit his final decision. And there was no guarantee that we will have a seat at the table beyond that decision date. So what do we need to do to realize a win-win-win solution in a system that is not designed to find consensus? I'll take 2 more minutes. Do we stack rank key variables? Do we do a weighted factor analysis? Do we explore complex what-if scenarios? I don't think we have time for that. So here's my proposal that I hope you will consider very seriously. It's a proposal that I have suggested to one of the members of council before, so it's not an unknown idea. There is a professional in our community who is a professional mediator. Her name is Anna Hosley, and I am not personally friends with her. I have spoken with her once. Anna is a pastor, and her area of focus is solving the affordable housing crisis. She's very sensitive to the needs that many of the council have expressed with regards to providing housing. And so I would like to ask council to consider introducing Anna to this conversation to avoid what could potentially be a significant disruption to our community, and instead create a process of collaboration so that we can go the extra 30 or 40% to realize a win-win-win solution. That's the end of my public comment, and I want to thank you for taking some time this evening. If anybody would like Anna's card, I'm happy to share it with you. She's a well-known community figure, and I would encourage you to speak with her, even if you choose not to partake of her services in the near term. I do think having a mediator to facilitate complex land use and transportation questions would be valuable moving forward. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thanks.
And have a wonderful rest of your evening.
I'd be happy to take a card.
Maybe we could give it to Scott.
Yeah, Scott.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. So our first public hearing is the Accessory Dwelling Unit Code Amendments, an ordinance. Public hearing on the proposed interim accessory dwelling unit code amendments, file number ZA-2019-002 is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to take public comment on the proposed ADU code amendments. Does any council member wish to announce an actual or potential conflict of interest?
No.
Nor do I. Have we received any additional correspondence on the topic? Well, I'll ask that after Vera does her presentation. How about that?
Would you like the answer to that?
No, go ahead. Go do your thing first, and then you can answer that.
Okay.
I was reading ahead, sorry,
Gotcha.
out loud.
Okay.
Use your inside voice.
Yeah, I know, I forget sometimes.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Here to Vera Collies, Associate Planner, here to present the staff report for the interim accessory dwelling unit code amendments. This process started a couple of years ago via recommendations from the Department of Land and Conservation Development. This is the result of a lot of discussion and debate at local, regional, and state level regarding the housing crisis here in Oregon. DLCD a couple of years ago made recommendations to remove, to have communities amend their codes to remove certain barriers to the creation of certain types of housing, specifically accessory dwelling units or ADUs. Those recommendations included removing the owner occupancy requirement that was found in many local codes that for those municipalities that allowed ADUs, as well as requiring additional off-street parking spaces for ADUs. Those are two things that can be seen as barriers to the development of ADUs on certain properties. They were just recommendations at that point. Shift to or fast forward to Oregon House Bill 2001 that passed recently. That includes an entire suite of requirements within municipalities to make middle housing and lower income housing available to more folks in Oregon. Part of that House Bill 2001 requires that certain amendments be made and that are effective January 1st of 2020. Those two items are to have the owner occupancy of either the primary dwelling unit or the ADU, to have that requirement removed from your code, as well as the requirement for off-street parking spaces. The Milwaukee's code currently requires both of those things for ADUs. So the code amendments that are before you are, I guess we've used the term surgical before, but they're surgical amendments to specifically address these requirements that were identified in House Bill 2001. So these amendments would remove the requirement for owner occupancy of the property that has an ADU, and would remove the requirement for an additional off-street parking space for an ADU. However, the House Bill does permit municipality to still require off-street parking spaces for ADUs that are being used as vacation rentals. So we are opting, or we're proposing that we would still require that off-street parking space for a vacation rental, for an ADU that was being used as a vacation rental. And if I may, I just want to clarify for folks, because this question came up at the Planning Commission hearing, the difference between a vacation rental and a short-term rental. So a short-term rental is an Airbnb unit. You live in your house, you occupy your property for at least 270 days a year, and you're renting out either an accessory guest cottage or something on your property, or a bedroom in your house through an Airbnb type of mechanism to rent out space in your home. A vacation rental is a property that you don't live in, and you are renting out the whole property for extended periods of time. In our code, vacation rentals are permitted only via a conditional use. So there is a Type 3 review process at the Planning Commission. So there was some questions about ADUs being used as vacation rentals and not being required for owner occupancy or for off-street parking, and that entire process is a Type 3 review process. And we've only permitted, I think, 2 or maybe 3 vacation rentals in the city since we permitted those. We do have short-term rentals in the city on Airbnb, and those are going through their review process as required by the code, or as we find them, and then they go through the review process as required by the code. So I hope that clarifies that issue with the vacation rentals, but what we're focusing on are the ADUs that are being constructed and then used as rental properties for long-term rentals for folks that are renting them for their homes. So again, sort of circling back, the proposed code amendments would remove those 2 requirements, owner occupancy and the off-street parking space, so that we are in compliance with House Bill 2001, and the effective date of these code amendments would be January 1st, 2020, as required by the House Bill. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I guess just sort of from a practical sense, somebody comes in to get the permit to build it, they say, no, it's going to be a long-term rental, and then a year later, it's on the market as a vacation rental. What's our process for monitoring that, knowing that, outside of them actually doing what they should do?
Right. So typically, we discover these things a couple of ways. A neighbor tells us about it and calls code enforcement or code enforcement. So Tim Salyers is our code enforcement officer and has a very robust system for finding both short-term and long-term rentals that have not gone through the process. We don't have that many, and we have a shared list that he can access, so he knows what we've processed. And I'm not sure exactly how often, but I know he's checking basically all of the various websites that have short-term and long-term rentals, and he's really diligent about it. We get emails has anybody heard anything about this property? And we were all looking, no, we don't. And then the letter goes out. So we would be circling back through the code enforcement process at that point. Yeah.
And then we would cause them to build off-street parking if they were going to keep it as a vacation rental, or?
Good question. If they, I guess I don't know that I can speak for that land use process. It would be a requirement. So when they went through the Type 3 process with the Planning Commission, they would have to address that code requirement. And if they could not provide it, they would need a variance to the requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's not really a question, but I guess the Planning Commission expressed some concerns that you didn't bring up.
Sorry, no, you're right. No, I was sort of going through all of that.
Yeah. And I thought they were very well. I mean, I thought their discussion was really good, and I share those concerns. But they were concerned about the state dictating things that are better decided at the local level, and I do share that concern. In fact, I'm going to have an article about that in tomorrow's Clackamas Review. But we are under a state dictate, so there's not a lot we can do about it. But I mean, I did think that we should make clear that they had concerns.
Thank you. If I may, thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it. The Planning Commission did hold their public hearing on November 12th. They did vote unanimously to support the code amendments. However, they did caveat their comments within the motion to include an objection that the city should have the opportunity to regulate things like off-street parking and owner occupancy, because I think I should have used quotation marks, that decisions like this are better made at the local level than at the state level. So they did have they took umbrage with the state for requiring.
And was that a majority that took umbrage?
Yeah.
They all agreed they all voted with the motion, with supporting the code amendments, but with that motion that, some of these decisions ought to be made at the local level. But yeah, so thank you for that. My apologies for missing that.
Anything else? Okay. Have we received any additional correspondence on this topic?
Yes, some correspondence was received by the Office of the City Recorder today from Elvis Clark, and I believe that was included or was made available to you regarding some specific comments regarding the on-site owner occupancy should be retained as a condition of vacation rental ADUs, and as I suggested, that is something that would be part of the conditional use review process for proposals like that. The construction of new ADUs should require sidewalk construction or fee in lieu, so frontage improvements. Right now, they are required through our engineering department requirements for ADUs. So unless new policy or changes were made to that, right now that's not being changed and it's not being proposed to be changed. That has been identified as a barrier to the development of ADUs, frontage requirements as well as SDCs. But at this point, we're not making any of those amendments to the code. So I hope that addresses Mr. Clark's comments there.
Yes, any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Vera. Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed amendments? No? Okay, then I will skip the part about public testimony.
I move to close the public hearing on the proposed ADU code amendments.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on the proposed ADU code amendments. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. The public testimony portion of the public hearing of the proposed ADU code amendments is hereby closed. Is there council discussion?
There's not a lot to discuss. I mean, the state has dictated it, and I mean, I like I said, I agree with the concerns the Planning Commission raised, but in the scope of the things that are dictated in 2001, I think these are some of the less problematic ones. You know, I do think, you know, but it is highlights some of the issues we have ahead for us next year in terms of like off-street parking. I mean, we have some streets in the city where there's plenty of off-street parking, and we have other streets in the city where off-street parking is very constrained. All streets are not created equal in this city. And so, I mean, those concerns that they discussed will resurface again in areas where they probably will have potentially bigger impact than this package might have.
Well, not that it matters because we're being told what to do, but and this is one instance where I agree with the state on both counts. They were clear back when we passed our ADU code to begin with. I was the minority voice, and this was two of the things that I disagreed with. The point of ADUs is to create inexpensive dwelling units, and the more caveats and restrictions and limitations that we layer on top of it, the less of it there will be, by proof of the fact that we've had a handful built as opposed to the hundreds and hundreds that have been built in Portland. So I applaud the state on this move, personally, for whatever that's worth.
Well, and I think when we, and to our credit, we should do this. We always imagine the worst-case scenario whenever we envision how policy will translate into code and what the on-the-ground impacts will be. Just because on-street parking is not required does not mean that it will not occur with the construction of ADUs. I'm sorry, yes, off-street parking does not mean that it will not occur. So there's just...
Nope.
So that's all.
And there are probably plenty of houses that have it already, right? They have a two-car garage, and they have, you know, space for 4 cars off street or whatever, you know. So there will be plenty of houses that already have it.
Sure. Yeah, and that's all I'm getting at is oftentimes it is going to be a larger house with a big garage and a big driveway in the front, and it's a non-issue.
Right.
Okay. So I move for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Milwaukie Municipal Code, MMC Title 19, zoning for the purpose of compliance with Oregon House Bill 2001, file ZA-2019-002.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded for first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Milwaukie Municipal Code, Title 19, zoning for the purposes of compliance with the Oregon House Bill 2001, file number ZA-2019-002. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. Passes unanimously. Ms. Ober, would you please read the ordinance by title only twice?
An ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Milwaukie Municipal Code, Title 19, zoning for the purpose of compliance with Oregon House Bill 2001, file number ZA 2019-002. And again, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Milwaukie Municipal Code, Title 19, zoning for the purpose of compliance with Oregon House Bill 2001, file number ZA 2019-002.
Mr. Stoffer, would you please poll the council?
Council President Falconer.
Aye.
Councilor Beatty.
Aye.
Councilor Parks.
Aye.
Councilor Heisey.
Aye.
Mayor Gamba.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0, ordinance 2186.
All right. Moving right along. Public hearing of the Planning Commission's decision to deny master land use, file number NR-2018-005 Elk Rock Estates. Appeal, land use file number AP-2019-003, continued from December 10th, 2019. The public hearing on the appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to deny a natural resources cluster development application, file number NR-2018-005 and AP-2019-003 is called to order. This hearing will be based on the same evidence on which the Planning Commission made its decision. On November 19th, Council heard testimony related to the appeal of the Planning Commission's decision. And on December 3rd and 10th, Council deliberated. At today's hearing, Council intends to confirm the tentative decision arrived at on December 10th.
That doesn't seem right.
What happened?
That's
Intends to continue deliberation, maybe
Yeah.
the better way to say that.
no additional testimony will be taken on this matter. The purpose of this hearing is for council to consider the appeal filed by Gillis Properties. The appellant has requested that council reevaluate the evidence and testimony that pertains to the proposed 12-unit natural resources cluster development. Staff will now cite the applicable standards to be considered.
MMC Title 12.16 Access Management, MMC Title 12.24 Clear Vision at Intersections, MMC 18.04 Flood Hazard Area, MMC 19.301 Low Density Residential Zones, Title 19.401 Willamette Greenway Zone, Title 19.402 Natural Resources, Title 19.504 Site Design Standards, Title 19.505 Building Design Standards, Title 19.600 Off-Street Parking and Loading, Title 19.700 Public Facility Improvements, Title 19.911 Variances, Title 19.1006 Type 3 Review, and Title 19.1010 Appeals.
The order of business will be discussion of site visits, jurisdiction, and impartiality, staff update on the appeal since the last hearing, questions from council to staff, discussion and motion on final order. The applicant has the burden of proving the application complies with all relevant criteria of the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances. The city is in receipt of the appeal, which identifies the issues and the reasons for the appeal. Any party withstanding may appeal the decision of the council to the State Land Use Board of Appeals according to the rules adopted by that board. Persons withstanding are those who testify or sign the council attendance sign-up sheet in the hallway. Has any council member visited the site?
Yes.
Does any council member wish to announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest?
No.
Once again, I have had extensive ex parte contact, and I do live across the street, so in the interests of preserving impartiality, or the appearance of impartiality, I never can word this correctly, I'm going to recuse myself, is the point.
Okay, don't go far.
And I've previously disclosed ex parte contacts, and I've had no additional ex parte contacts since then.
Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge a council member's impartiality or ability to participate in this decision? Seeing none, does any audience member wish to challenge the council's jurisdiction over this matter? Also seeing none, let us proceed to the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Vera Coles, Associate Planner. On December 10th, last week, council held a continued public hearing, deliberated, and reached a tentative decision to deny the application and affirm the denial by the Planning Commission with some modified findings. Council provided the applicant with the opportunity to either amend the application or submit conditions of approval so that the application could meet applicable criteria. That information was to be submitted by noon on December 16th, yesterday. We did receive by that deadline a letter from Michael Robinson, the attorney for the applicant, that included two alternative sets of conditions of approval. One set of conditions of approval applied to the application as is before you for the 12 units. There was another set of conditions of approval that would reflect the conditions for an amended application. that would provide for, and I'll just summarize from the letter, the retention of the 2 existing single-family homes on the property and the creation of 3 additional lots that would each contain a single-family home, basically in between those existing 2 homes. So the resultant project, there weren't any plans or anything like that submitted, but that the resultant project would be 5 single-family homes built close to 19th Avenue. So those conditions of approval for the amended application were included in that letter. And so that is for your discussion this evening. Yes. So that's the only update from the staff report.
Okay.
So,
Question? Yeah, go ahead.
so if we want to move forward with the applicant's alternative proposal, I mean, it's obviously not, it's not fully fleshed, so we're not deciding that tonight. We're just deciding, do we want to move forward? Do we encourage him to move forward? I would say to the applicant that I really appreciate that he heard our concerns, and I think he's, without prejudging a future application, I think he's on a good path.
Does the letter, I think the letter actually described the difference in encroachment into HCA, and can you just remind me what those numbers are?
Sure. So there would be the 5 buildable lots. They would, as described, they would need a couple of variances, one of which would be a variance to minimum density with only 5 dwelling units. That is below the minimum density for the property. They would need a variance likely for the width of the new lots to be able to fit into the frontage that the properties have collectively. But the encroachment, the way the conditions are written, that the total disturbance to the HCA would not exceed 10,000 square feet under this. And again, there isn't a site plan, so I think it's an estimate at this point. As a reminder, the disturbance under the existing proposal is 38,500 square feet.
And in addition to the lesser disturbance, there's no fill, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I mean, there's
as
no.
described in the.
Yeah.
And there was also consideration of dedication of land to the city?
Yes, as a swap for mitigation for that HCA disturbance, the proposal would deed over the island area west of the slough to the city as part of Spring Park and that park area, yes.
Any other questions?
Could you just also state, I think that letter also stated the time frame that they would extend.
Right.
Could you?
The way the letter is written, it provided an extension through Friday for staff and the applicant to work out sort of a hearing schedule and so on. We've had some discussion since then at the staff level, knowing that should the council want to move forward with this amended information, then we would need to continue the hearing to a date certain. So at this point, we're working on a February 4th date for that hearing. And we would need to, and we can talk about what that extension looks like from the applicant, who would need to, would be able to provide that. But that the continued hearing to review the amended application would be on February 4th.
So he expects he could have the amended application. I mean, you would need it a few weeks before that.
We would,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
So the idea is that sort of back of the house discussions will be with the applicant and applicant's attorney to come up with, what do we need, what does staff need to be able to do an analysis of that revision. We would advertise the hearing on February 4th. We would sort of function as with a public hearing. So there would be notice 20 days prior and so on, and have those materials available for public review as well. But yes, staff would still need to analyze the application based on the approval criteria as set out in the code. And that would include the engineering department for floodplain and, all of those things. But yes, so we've committed to wanting to streamline that process and be as efficient as possible, understanding the time frame that we're all working under here. Yep.
from a purely legalistic standpoint, since the clock in the letter was extended to Friday and we're set up to vote to extend it 120 days, do we need a request from the applicant to extend the clock for 120 days?
No, ORS 197-522, the statute we're operating under, gives the city the discretion to extend the clock for a period of time necessary to consider the amendment or the proposed conditions.
Cool.
So the applicants here, we believe, it's kind of a team effort here. The city can extend the clock, and the applicant is willing to acknowledge that extension and agree with it. And I believe the date is actually March 3rd, is a Tuesday?
The extension,
Okay.
right, the hearing would be
March
February 4th.
We have-
Right,
Yeah, February 4th.
And March
The extension would be to the next meeting, or two meetings, which would be March 3rd, I believe, is a Tuesday. The idea would be that we would have a public hearing on February 4th, adhere to a similar schedule that we have today, which would be a second hearing on February 18th. If timing doesn't allow us to come to a tentative decision on the 18th, or a final decision on the 18th, we would continue and adopt a final decision on the meeting on March 3rd.
On March 3rd, and then the clock actually runs out the next day.
Correct.
Just like this one.
But when you extend this meeting, you're going to punt it to the 4th of February, which is why Vera was
That's the
speaking.
Okay, so the clock does actually extend to March 4th. The last meeting would be March 3rd.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
Makes sense.
huge.
Yes.
Got it.
Just like tomorrow would be the day that this one.
Got it.
And actually, if I were you, I would extend it to March 4th, just to make sure that you.
That's what the script had, but then I was rewriting it.
No, that's great.
I'm rewriting it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, if I confused things, I meant the continued hearing
Yep.
is to February 4th,
Yep.
but the extension
Yep.
is tomorrow. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. It's
Cool.
a lot of hearings today.
All right. Is there any council discussion?
Do we need to close the public hearing? There's no.
It's
We weren't in a public
not-
hearing.
We weren't.
no
There was
testimony
no
or-
testimony. We never opened the
I
public
just want
hearing.
to make sure.
Yeah.
that we open the-
Do we need the applicant's letter, or his attorney's letter, put forward two things, this new alternative proposal and those old conditions of approval that the Planning Commission had rejected? Do we need to take some action vis-à-vis those?
No, I don't believe so. If you look at the text of the statute, the applicant is allowed to amend the application or propose conditions of approval that would bring it within the deficiencies that you identified during your deliberations. The applicant is unwilling to waive all of his prior arguments vis-à-vis the existing unit, but has also proposed this amended version for you to process. So that process the process around that one will kind of be in abeyance, so to speak, while we process through this one.
Okay.
Any discussion?
I don't have anything further.
No, I think it's a good step.
And I'd like to point out, I'm not sure whether it was mentioned, but the process here will be, tonight's hearing is continued to a date certain, which would be February 4th. That meeting will also be noticed as a public meeting. And so when we come back together on February 4th, we will receive a staff report on the new proposal. The applicant will also be given a chance, and the public will also be given a chance to comment. But it will be limited to this new proposal.
Okay.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll move to acknowledge the extension of the 120-day land use clock to March 4th, 2020, and to continue the hearing to a date certain of February 4th, 2020, for further consideration of the applicant's proposal.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to acknowledge extension of the 120-day land use clock to March 4th, 2020, and to continue the hearing to a date certain of February 4th, 2020, for further consideration of the applicant's proposal. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. So it will be a new public hearing on February 4th, where we will be hearing testimony from the public on the new proposal.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Approval of short-term sheet and delegation of authority for the Coho Point.
There's not a short in there.
Term-
It's in
term. I'm in short. Somebody's in short. Approval of a term sheet and delegation of authority for Coho Point at Kellogg Creek.
Kathy
How
on
are
a
you?
2-minute delay in there. Is that?
Project resolution. I'll go grab her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just
Okay.
gather my wits.
There she is.
Look, here I am.
Look, tonight you get to come back.
I do. I feel loved.
Yes, sort of.
Tonight you get to come back.
I thought I did.
Because one of us is going to have to make a motion, so.
Yes.
All right, well, good evening, Mayor, Councilors. Layla Aman, the Community Development Director, and I'm joined tonight by Fareed Balouri, who is with BlackRock LLC and our development partner on Coho Point at Kellogg Creek. So tonight is a milestone moment. We are asking for you to adopt a resolution approving a term sheet for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek project and authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a development and disposition agreement that is subject to conditions, and I'll discuss those later in my presentation. As you guys all well know with me, I like to go back to the start when we get closer to the end, just to remind folks of where we've been and how we got here today. So just to sort of re-describe both for your benefit and for the public, why this property. This is a city-owned property. It was identified in the movie Milwaukie Forward, a major public outreach aspect that we went through that it resulted in us updating our development code in downtown. This site was identified as an opportunity site for redevelopment. So why should this city participate? Development offerings such as this that local jurisdictions and other jurisdictions take on are intended to achieve public benefit. And so the majority of my presentation tonight will be focused on the public benefit that this project will be providing. So the proposed terms, just so we can clarify what we're approving tonight and what we'll move into the next phase, is a term sheet. It's a non-binding agreement, but it does define what, with your approval, what staff can negotiate to a binding agreement. That binding agreement is the Development and Disposition Agreement, and that's the DDA. So just to go back to the start, so the timeline is we declared this property surplus in April of 2017. We released an RFQ. We selected BlackRock LLC. In fact, it was maybe my first week here that I came before you to approve exclusive negotiations with Fareed and his team. You approved that. And since then, we've done quite a bit of work. We've done an extensive, I think, community outreach process with respect to this property. We held 2 open houses. We had an online survey and received significant feedback from the community. We also did a outreach to the Design and Landmarks Committee. So in advance of when we had sort of our schematic design, we took that to DLC to get feedback. We adjusted the design based on community feedback. And then most recently, the second outreach event we had was at the grand opening of the South Downtown area. And we elected to do that because we felt that it would get a greater cross-section of folks that wouldn't otherwise come out to an event like an open house. And I had to leave a little early to accompany Councilor Parks and our city manager to a school board meeting, but from my understanding is that we were the late group, that there was still folks sort of meandering around, and I think we got probably a couple hundred people through that to talk with us about the project. So we're really pleased with that. Today, we're asking for your approval of a term sheet and to delegate authority to the city manager, as I mentioned, to do the DDA. We anticipate by March, our ENA, our exclusive negotiating agreement, expires at the end of March. So we are going to be moving forward on that DDA as swiftly as we can. And we'll be coming back to you if needed to get approval on that. Ideally, this project will continue through the design process through spring and summer of 2020, and I think we're still anticipating a construction start, hopefully, of fall and winter. A lot of that's contingent on going through the FEMA conditional letter of map revision process for that site.
Before you go on, can I ask about the second open house, or the thing that was the night of the plaza dedication? I walked by there a few times, and it was lively. There were a lot of people there, but you didn't give us any sort of input of what came of that, or what the comments were, or what comments were gathered, or what was the, So is there anything you can tell us about that?
Might move further on? Yeah. So the purpose of that was to show to the community what we did differently. So it wasn't necessarily a feedback ask at that time. We had gone out to the community originally and to DLC and solicited feedback. We also had an online survey. You may recall, I think we had almost 100 people respond to that. So what the design team did is they took that feedback and they changed the design. And so the intent of that second meeting was to say, we heard you and this is how we adjusted the design. So it was intended to be an inform event as opposed to sort of a feedback loop. So hopefully that helps clarify what our intent was there. So the goals, just to remind you, these are the goals that were listed in the RFP. I won't go through them in detail because I go through them in detail ad nauseum as we move forward. And I broke the 10-slide rule, but I promise I'll get through it really quickly. So I like visual images quite a lot. So what is the project? These are some visual renderings of that. The project is a 201-unit project that Fareed and his team are proposing that 10% of the units, so approximately 20 of those units, will be affordable at 80% of area median income or less for a period of no less than 30 years. So that's a significant thing. And if we go back to the original goals, we actually did not require any affordable housing. And so I'll talk about this a little later, but this is an element that goes above and beyond what we had hoped to get out of this project. Initially, this was a project to help us revitalize our downtown, get more housing units, get a more active corner down there, which we will achieve through this project. But in addition to that, we're also going to get at least 10% of those units to be affordable.
Your fourth bullet, it didn't use the word affordable housing, but it did kind of call for that. It said,
a range of housing.
A range of incomes, variety of incomes.
Yeah. So we're happy to see that we'll have some income-restricted properties on there. The project also proposes 87 parking spaces, which is a 0.3 per unit parking ratio. And I just want to highlight that because this is something that is, I think, a unique aspect of this project. And given its location, one of the other goals that we had set that this would be a transit-oriented development project. And one of the main tenets of a TOD is something that has a lower parking ratio because you're looking to find tenants who don't have a car and who value that as a value for themselves.
And just to make sure I heard it correctly, it's 0.43, correct?
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah, per unit.
Oh, you said 0.3. I was like, wait, did that change?
That's why I write it up here and have slides, just so we can be crystal clear.
Aren't there also, if I remember correctly, hundreds of bicycle
700.
Yeah, I think it's 700.
That wasn't a typo.
I believe that's a little overkill.
Yeah,
but
probably.
I think
Unless you were going after
700.
That's
I don't know if my microphone.
For 200 units? Yeah, that seems
That's
like.
five. That's five per
going after
unit.
those
Shared
folks
bike
that have
parking.
5
Shared parking and shared
mountain
bike.
bike
We could
and
probably,
road
we could
bike
maybe
and-
negotiate
Well, that's
that.
true. There are.
A lot of
We
those
might have to
people.
drop that down a little bit. It's a little cost prohibitive to have 700.
You might be cornering a particular market there.
Good.
go.
I
But,
have
my
5
dental
bikes.
office is obviously located in that area, and it's amazing how many people use the light rail. I mean, that has been, to me, it's probably one of the most positive things that has happened to the city of Milwaukee and the amount of people that use it. So our parking ratio is a little bit lower than what the city requires, but I believe having, enough studio units, which usually the occupant is only 1%, they could be using bike or the public transportation. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I have 5 bikes, so I would.
Right.
So So what I'm going to go through is when we established the exclusive negotiating agreement, so that E&A, we also established base development criteria, which took those goals that I highlighted for you and really dove into some detail to provide guidance to the developers. They went through the design process. I thought it would be helpful for both you and our community members to understand how the project is specifically delivering on all of these goals. So what we asked for is a signature gateway building that's mixed use, a minimum 5 stories with housing, with active ground floor that maximizes the development potential of the site. What the proposed project results in is a 6-story building on Main Street that steps down to 4 stories on McLaughlin. So it certainly maximizes the development potential on the site. It's a mixed-use building with housing and active commercial ground floor space. It maximizes the site at 201 units, and the project also responded to community and DLC feedback. So a few examples of this, you've seen this before, but it's always helpful to see it again. This was the original proposal. So it was a 5-story donut building with a basement. We heard by and large, both from DLC and from community members, that that was so monolithic and just really didn't feel appealing. So given the financial constraints as well on this project, the unit count was an essential thing to maintain. So what the architect came up with, I thought, was really clever. They sort of transferred that 5th floor to a 6th floor and then stepped the building down in order to both accommodate the accommodate the existing units, but also to address that feedback point that we heard. And what results, I think, is we asked for a signature building, a much more interesting building. This opens up a lot more of the view shed for both tenants, as well as those that will be viewing from the right-of-way that's adjacent to the site. It also creates an opportunity for community gathering spaces as well. So I think that that was a clever way of addressing that, and allows us to keep the unit counts that are necessary for it financially. The other feedback that we got, both again from the Design Landmarks Commission and community, was the orientation of the active ground floor space. So the space that's indicated in blue is what was originally proposed as a lobby space. And for those of us that are quite familiar with this area, this is adjacent to our new beautiful plaza and Dogwood Park. And then the orange area indicates where there would be active retail space. What we heard is we wanted to see activation along the Adams Street connector and the Dogwood Park side more. And then there was also a request to do something about the corner of McLaughlin and Washington. Now, DLC asked us to put retail there. It's really a pretty terrible corner, frankly, for retail, but I think what the result is actually a pretty clever, again, idea, which is that they could kind of cut a notch out, you can see in the corner, to create more of a pedestrian refuge. There's some landscaping there. The bike facility parking area is right there. So it creates sort of a safer pedestrian refuge for folks to gather and to cross over into the park. They reoriented the retail to be alongside the Dogwood Park area, and you can see there's a little notch cut out there, which is an outdoor seating area. We're hoping to put a restaurant in there.
That's our hope.
That's our goal. So that area will be a much more engaging and active space where there'll be views that will be leveraged from that site that will be available and open to the public.
So the blue is going to be like the building lobby or something?
Yes.
And everything else is going to be retail?
Correct.
Because something in the staff report made me think the retail was only on the Adams Street side and not the rest of Main Street.
Oh, I apologize. It was emphasizing that we moved a portion of that retail to be alongside that. It was originally actually proposed to be residential, so we sort of switched things out and made that so that it was more accessible.
That was more response to the need for a restaurant with some view to be able to enjoy the view of the Willamette River. So I think that corner would definitely serve that purpose.
It was our compromise for the rooftop.
We couldn't do the rooftop.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And there was mention in there of a balcony for the restaurant?
Yeah, so that little notch that's cut out, so that's an outdoor seating area.
Oh, okay.
And so that will be a sort of a balcony.
Like the 4th story level there?
Yeah, I actually have some aerial photos I can show you of what it'll look like, because it's always helpful. So just to give you a sense of how we'll activate the corner, so this is a corner of Adams Street looking towards from Dogwood looking north towards Washington, and that's what the proposed design looks like. So you can see how it really integrates into the Dogwood Park area. The images
I like that much better than a rooftop.
I
restaurant, I just have to say.
Really?
It's way less exclusive.
It is way less exclusive. You feel much more invited to come into this space than to go through a private residence up to a rooftop.
With the farmer's market and
Yeah.
plaza. And
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
It's awesome to have that there.
And you said you have there was a drone, there was like a rendering of some sort where you could really see how much engagement you get, how much of a view you get from that space to the river.
Yeah, I put those
Okay.
back in here because they were a big hit last time, so I like to go with what's successful.
What's surprising? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
think from ground level, but.
Right. So the other base development criteria for design and development is including the property at 1103 Southeast Main Street. So if Dr. Belluri owns that property, it will be incorporated into the project to leverage views of the Willamette River and to orient the building and connect with the Max Orange Line and bike facilities. You've heard we're providing bike facilities in the project. So this diagram illustrates where the main view sheds are. So there's a view of the park, the creek, and the river. So the fourth floor view is about right here. So this is looking northwest, McLaughlin. This is the west view. This is southwest to McLaughlin. So you start to bring in Elk Rock Island, the Kellogg Creek, and then the south view of Kellogg Creek as well. And then at the ground level, sort of at the restaurant level, as Councilor Faulkner was mentioning, this is the view that you would have. So this is right about where we are at Main Street. So there's about a 13-foot elevation difference between Main Street and McLaughlin. And so that actually delivers a pretty great view. And you get a really nice view as well of the creek. So the other thing was connecting to the orange line. Just want to highlight, which I highlighted on here, is how it's kind of just right there. So it's pretty direct. Yeah, you can't miss it. And now the lobby is really oriented to get folks out there. And also just want to highlight too the massive amount of accessibility as it relates to our regional trail system. So you're accessing, once the Kronberg Trail is open, we'll be able to just shoot down south to get onto the trolley trail south. You can also just cross McLaughlin now and do that as well. You can head west on the Springwater, or you can head down Main Street and connect to the Springwater if you want to head out east. So it's got exceptional access. So housing, the goal was to meet community housing needs. So there's a mix of unit types, a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, a couple of 3-bedroom units. And again, 10% of those units will be affordable, 80% of AMI or less for a period of no less than 30 years. And I'm particularly excited and grateful for that piece. So public realm improvements, the goals were to contribute to South Downtown Plaza area and Festival Street, connect Kellogg Creek and Milwaukie Bay Park, infrastructure for a future underpass, and supporting district parking. The proposed project opens the floor up, as we just discussed, on South Downtown. There'll be grading for a mixed-use, for a multi-use path, and the project will also construct the retaining wall for the future multi-use path that will go underneath 99. And then we are in discussions about committing a portion of the parking for daytime public use. And this will likely be for permit holders, just because the likelihood will be that it will be for daytime employees. So getting those folks off the street and into a facility, it's a good match for residential daytime users. So that's also an exciting and innovative thing that the project brings as well, just to give folks a sense of what I'm talking about. So the plaza is there. That's the building footprint. The future bike path will follow this alignment. We're also, as part of the project, the team is including a pedestrian connection, because we know that the underpass is a little bit longer term than this project, and we wanted to see something go in sooner than later. So the team was open to and will be designing in a pedestrian connection that will come from Adams Street, circle behind the building, and connect up to 99. And with that nice little refuge on 99 and Washington, you really do start to really directly connect to the park. And also, because we've been looking at sort of these concrete looking things, I just want to highlight the green that will become part of this as well. So there'll be a second-story stormwater rain garden, so the residents that are sort of interior views will have a view of this lovely rain garden as well. And then it will be landscaped as well. And
We actually have patios.
oh, there'll be patios.
Yeah,
Nice.
Some other cool things about the project as well.
And so that's like at the second floor level?
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, just kind of illustrating that this project really knits together Milwaukie Bay Park, Dogwood Park, Cronenberg Park, and then with that pedestrian pathway that will be built as part of the project, it will realize that in a much shorter term than when we build out the pedestrian underpass. So that's also very exciting. Sustainability, so we had asked for LEED Gold or equivalent, and then solar power. Fried and team are pursuing and enrolled in the Energy Trust of Oregon's Path to Net Zero program. So since the time we issued the RFP and today, the city's goal in terms of reaching a net zero has been more of a priority, and so that was the path that the team elected to take, and they've already had their design charrette. They're considering different options in terms of integrating that into the project as well. So we feel confident they'll deliver on that. And then they'll be considering solar as well as part of the project. And a few other items. One of the items that was in the RFP or response was engaging with local businesses to source subcontractors and engaging with local educational workforce development institutions. So Fried and team are still open to doing that as part of the construction contract. And then finally, we required they meet all the infrastructure improvements. That will be as part of the land use process. So they will be required to meet all those improvements, and then the building will be connected to high-speed internet. We made sure that all the stub outs were put in place to support any new development on that site when we were constructing South Downtown. So water, sewer, all of the things have actually been stubbed out to the site already. And the team gave us feedback on where those locations were. So the proposed terms that we're talking about tonight will set the stage for negotiations, as I mentioned, that will lead to a binding agreement. The proposed city financial participation has been, always been, land value write-down. So that land value write-down, basically the requirements that we have put on the project have created, we call extraordinary costs. And so we are proposing to write the land value down to help support those costs. There's discussion around a potential exemption from the construction excise tax should the project indeed deliver 10% of those units as affordable at 80% of AMI for 30 years or more, a potential waiver of system development charges, and then certainly my team and myself will be assisting in finding other grants and financial resources. So we've been talking to other public partners as well as how to participate in this. We're having initial conversations with Metro's Transit-Oriented Development Program, who are excited about this project, and others as well. The conditions, as I mentioned, based on conversations that we've had, that if there are city-controlled system development charges that we do decide to put forward, we will come back to you for approval of that. If those are not included, we're asking that we just are able to delegate that authority to the city manager, and we negotiate the DDA with the team. So, if approved, staff will start to work with BlackRock to draft and execute a DDA subject to those conditions that I've mentioned. So our ask tonight is for you to approve the term sheet for Coho Point and authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a development and disposition agreement. And with that, I think both Fried or I are happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, given that I keep seeing, it's not just me, but I noticed today when I was at the food cart pod, of the 5 bikes parked next to the light rail station, 4 of them were electric. So given that, how many of the 700 bike parking places are going to have access to
Charging
capabilities?
I knew you were going to ask
me that question. I know, it's a curveball.
Well, I think, first, I don't think we need 700 bikes.
Probably not.
So by not putting 700, I think we probably have the budget to put enough of those stations that they can charge their bikes.
Yeah.
Kind of defeats the whole purpose of having an electric bike if you're doing it for exercise.
Yeah.
But that's my kind of a bike, actually. So, but I'm sure we can accommodate for that. I don't see a reason. In the previous projects, we've accommodated for electric cars. So electric bikes cannot be that more complicated than
It's actually
cars.
much easier.
So, yeah.
Way easier, yeah.
So
An outlet.
I'm sure we'll look into it when the time comes.
I'd like to point out, before we get into too many detailed questions, that this is really an overview and an approval to enter the DDA, and that this whole process will run through the Planning Commission. We have some planning commissioners here, and ultimately, it's a Type 3 process that could end up in front of council. So I just want to remind you all of that before you dive into specific questions. We're just in the dance here to see if we can push the ball down the road to get to those places.
And actually, on that same front, Councilor Beatty, you had asked about specific feedback from the community that may have come through some of the recent community meetings. We expect that some of those same individuals will be making comments to the Planning Commission and possibly to you in the future. And all of those are important parts of that process. And so this will not be the last time. Actually, there is a very large opportunity for the community to engage in this discussion. It'll be during an application if we receive approval to proceed through the DDA.
Well, I guess that gets to the point that even though we've discussed here numbers of parking spaces and numbers of floors, we are not making any decisions on that. All of that has to go through Planning Commission.
Absolutely.
We are,
And we currently
nothing
don't
we
have
do today dictates any of that.
Absolutely not. And we don't have an application filed yet, so you're going to get people asking you about it, and to the extent you're aware of things and that are happening, it's okay to comment, but know that an application is coming.
And this is going to show a little of my naivete, but I believe that a Type 3 goes to Planning Commission. If it is not appealed, then it wouldn't come before council. So it is possible that you would not get another bite at this. But just to preserve your ability to make a decision on that, we wanted to make sure we were transparent during this discussion.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, I have one change that I'd like to make to this agreement. Item 3.2, which is on page RS24. Says the DDA will be expressly conditioned upon favorable BOLI determination that prevailing wages will not be required for the project. Further, the DDA will include requirement that the owners submit a request to BOLI and will use reasonable efforts to pursue a favorable determination. In a project that's as complex as a public-private partnership, obviously, there is going to be a BOLI determination that has to be made. One of the many things that our city has been working on is solving for affordable housing, which is, in my mind, kind of a fallout of the fact that a lot of people don't make what they used to make relative to the cost of housing anymore, right? Cost of housing has risen faster than incomes. One of the few places that actually do still protect people's incomes are the unions. So I would be uncomfortable with the city putting its finger on that scale. In other words, we'll use reasonable efforts to pursue favorable determination. I understand there has to be a BOLI decision. And I'm not advocating one way or the other on the BOLI decision at this point. I'm just, I think we need to reword that to where all we're saying is there needs to be a BOLI decision, go forth, get the BOLI decision, because it is a complex project and a lot of moving parts. And so I would like to have language that basically just says that there needs to be a BOLI decision applied for, or however that process works, and then we'll wait and see what happens after that.
Sure. Can I point out that in the exclusive negotiating agreement, we had language that referred to the Bureau of Labor and Industry Standards. And if I may read that piece from here, I think that might be acceptable to your concerns, Mayor. So in the E&A, it states developers securing so it's a precondition to closing. So we're saying prior to close, you have to do this. So the developer securing a predetermination letter from the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industry establishing that prevailing wage laws do not apply to the project, or in the event that such wage laws do apply, that adequate sources exist to pay any additional construction costs likely to be incurred as a result. So it puts us in a neutral position, which I think is more appropriate and addresses your needs. And then it puts the onus on the developer to go through that process with BOLI, and then we defer to BOLI on what their decision is for that.
Yeah, great, that's perfect, that's what,
Okay. So if we replace that term with this, is that?
that works for me. Does it work for the rest of you?
Can you just tell us what the term, where it was on the 11?
11.2.9 in the ENA.
Language is right there, but-
RS-24 on the,
Yeah, no, I was just wondering in terms of the language of the ENA, I just wanted to know what
I'd
that
have to
was.
pull it
It's,
up.
It's 11.2.9.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's reasonable. Good.
Any other changes or questions or concerns?
I didn't have any changes. I mean, I thought the document looked good, and I think the call to come back if there's an SDC waiver is the right, way to approach that. There's a lot to like in this building. I'm not with Councilor Falconer that I think the downstairs restaurant is better than a rooftop restaurant, but
I wanted both.
yeah, I see no reason not to have both.
You have hashtag fund me for the fourth floor.
Go fund me.
I did. So I was on the South Downtown Committee back in the day, as was the mayor back in 2007. I looked those records up ahead of the plaza dedication. And that group had, focused on the idea of an overpass. And I do, I get that the overpass is very expensive and doesn't really work with this project. I mean, I think that in that group, we were seeing a different kind of project where there was actually sort of a walkway appended to the building or something that kind of went out and became an overpass. An overpass is expensive. Unfortunately, it's probably the only place in town where it made sense because of the elevation changes and stuff. So trying to do one, across the street here and other places is probably even less feasible. So I do think we're kind of giving up the idea of an overpass, which is too bad. I mean, I think the underpass will be good, but I've heard from a fair number of people that they don't feel safe going in underpasses and they would prefer an overpass. So I just, want to recognize that we are probably giving that up for good. And then my only request to the developer would be, please be investigating bird-safe windows, because you're next to the creek and you're next to the river, and I think that we need to be thinking about that.
Good suggestion. We'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overpass is always a nice thought, but when you start playing that out on the other side and how it lands,
Yeah.
it gets ridiculous really fast.
Yeah. And it has to have an elevator to be ADA compliant, whereas an underpass can be much more accommodating.
Yeah, and I think this is a pie in the sky too, potentially, but if that bridge, I don't know if there's a bridge in Salem and a bridge in Eugene, both that are arched when they cross over a river. So when you do that, you create a lot more airspace and a lot more opening. That would make an underpass feel a lot more comfortable to people. So I think if we can endeavor to do that, we can make the underpass be something, plus it slows traffic down.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of perfect going into our downtown.
Also the part where that is in the flood zone, so they're going to have to do something to elevate it.
Yeah.
If they do anything.
So I'm less bummed about the overpass because I could never see how it was going to land on the other side.
I'd point out too, I just can't help myself right now, but there's also distribution lines as well that go along the other side, and so the relocation of those alone is not. So I meant to acknowledge that point in my remarks because it's something that you've mentioned and it's something that community desired, but I think it was a conceptual thought. The practicality of it, frankly, beyond just a financial discussion is extremely challenging.
Well, and the conceptual thought predated the way the access is now too. The access was different, and there probably was at that point a potential for landing on the other side, but you look at that picture and you definitely see that it's really tough now with the new bridge and the access coming in the way it does. Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody else? All righty. I would.
You ready for a motion?
Sure.
I move to approve the resolution and approving the term sheet and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a development and disposition agreement, DDA, with BlackRock LLC, subject to conditions.
I'll second.
I just wanted to, I was just going to, about the, I thought we'd agreed on the amendment.
With the amendment
Oh, right.
I
So I don't know if we want to, or
You
you want to withdraw or.
Withdraw and restate?
Yeah.
Do we need to just acknowledge amendment?
As amended
Yeah.
and read by staff.
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Do you want me to read the piece?
No, I think we can say as amended and read by
Yeah,
staff.
As amended by staff.
Yeah.
Okay, great. You still seconding?
Now I second?
Yes.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution approving the term sheet and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a development and disposition agreement, DDA, with BlackRock LLC, subject to conditions, including the amendment as discussed. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, good to see you.
Yeah. Very exciting. All right.
Lady gets to stay there.
I'm not going anywhere.
Gonna pitch a tent right there. Okay.
Wow.
Authorization of condition waivers of purchase of and leaseback of 10501 Southeast Main Street, the new City Hall. A resolution also be presented by Leila Aman.
And I've also asked Sarah Daly to join me up here at the dais in case you have any questions. For those of you that don't know Sarah has been serving as our broker for this project, and it's been an immense help to all of us. So we're really grateful for Sarah's assistance in this project. So tonight, we are asking for you to authorize the waiver of general conditions, the council waiver approval, and delegate authority to the city manager to finalize lease negotiations and waive the leaseback condition to execute a lease with the seller, who's Advantis Credit Union, to finalize the purchase and sale agreement for 10501 Southeast Main Street. This action will set the stage for us to finalize that purchase and sale agreement, so it really makes things solid. We are still in the process of negotiating the lease. We just received a copy of it today. There's some few things that we still have to work through before we can actually waive that condition, but what we're asking tonight is you to delegate that authority to the city manager so she can make that call when we're close enough on the lease terms, and then at that point we can execute on the lease as well. So just to give folks a sense of the timeline, council authorized staff to hire a broker and develop our financial strategy to acquire the property in June of 2019. In August of 2019, we executed a purchase and sale agreement. We've amended that agreement twice. Tonight, you'll be authorizing us to amend it a third time, which will add an extension time period for us to finalize the lease negotiations and to waive the two conditions that we're discussing tonight. We've been in the due diligence phase, as noted in the staff report, that we have gone through all of the elements of that due diligence, and the city is satisfied with the findings. And we have also, just so folks understand, that there is a repair that the seller will be doing on some of the balconies. We have hired a third-party building envelope consultant that will be jointly working with the seller on that and will be advising us through the process as well. So they'll be engaged in that process, doing site visits as well. So we're feeling really confident in that, and I believe they start construction. They just got their permit last week and should be starting construction soon. The leaseback condition then once it's waived, we'll finalize the PSA. The proposed close date at this time is March of next year, so of 2020, and that's when the leaseback period begins. If you recall, we agreed to a 27-month maximum leaseback period. It was 24 months, and they had the opportunity to do an additional 90-day extension. We've now collapsed that into, I think it's a 27-month period, and that begins in March. We have allowed the seller to come back to us with a one-time 90-day extension due to construction delays. They're doing a lot of this work, which is concrete work, in the winter. After building the library, I'm sensitive to the fact that it might take a little longer than they expect. But the important thing that should be noted is that our possession date, so based on that 27-month period, is July 1st of 2022, does not change. So if they move to extend the close time, they have to let us know by January. If they do let us know that, we can extend the clock for them up to 90 days, but that lease back period still ends at the end of June. So we still take possession of the building at the same time. So what that allows us to do is gives us adequate time if we need to move our date for when we pull the debt. That's why we asked for that 90-day notice period, and why we asked for that. We'll know a lot more in January once they get like literally under the skin of that building. So that is the action that we're asking for tonight, is for you to approve the resolution that waives all general conditions, the council waiver approval. So that's essentially you delegating that authority as well to our city manager to waive the leaseback condition and execute the lease with the seller. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Did I do that right?
You did. It's a 60-day notice requirement, though, from the seller if there is a delay in the construction. So by the end of January, so you got the dates right, the end of January, we'll know if they're going to exercise that extension option, and but it's a 90-day extension.
And so the lease back is, and I guess I don't know why I didn't have this question before. If they just suddenly, I mean, are they committed to the term of the lease back, or could they a year in go, oh, we're ready to go, we're ready to move, we're giving it to you now? No?
No.
No. And maybe one other way to think of sort of how we've adjusted the lease term is that actually isn't a period of time that the lease will run. It ends on a certain date.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be somewhere around 24 to 27 months. But if we have a delay in the construction, that amount of time will shrink by a little bit.
But if they just suddenly found a place,
they can't terminate the lease early.
Okay.
That's not to say they won't come to us at some point and say, I mean, they have a huge undertaking that they are going through, which is their, siting and building a new building. But they've been incredibly organized with the process, with planning the construction that they're doing on this building, and we really have they've made lots of reassurances that they've given us reason to believe that they will be good to go. And the city will hold the cards if that does happen.
Yeah, and I'd just add, they've been really good partners throughout this negotiation, so I appreciate the partnership that Advantis has brought, and the expertise that Sarah has also brought to the table has been immeasurably helpful.
Cool. Any other questions? Any motion then?
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to waive all conditions comprised of the general conditions, council waiver approval, and delegation of authority to the city manager to waive leaseback condition and finalize lease negotiations and execute a lease with the seller to finalize the purchase and sale agreement, PSA, for the acquisition of 10501 Southeast Main Street, Milwaukie, Oregon 97222 for the purpose of a city hall.
I'll second.
You couldn't make that any more complicated?
Yeah. That's no. I rewrote it like 5 times.
Excuse me, too.
But it's correct.
I move to approve the it has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to waive all conditions comprised of the general conditions, council waiver approval, and delegation of authority to the city manager to waive leaseback condition and finalize lease negotiations and execute a lease with the seller to finalize the purchase and sale agreement, PSA, for the acquisition of 10501 Southeast Main Street, Milwaukie, Oregon, 97222, for the purpose of a city hall. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously.
And Mayor, if I could take one moment, I just wanted to thank Layla. We have had the last hour of your council meeting has seemed almost fast, but this has been years of work. Both of these projects have been just an exceptional amount of work, and we could not have done it without her. She nailed it, and I really appreciate how much effort, time, passion she has put into both projects.
Here, here.
Excellent work. Thank you, Layla.
Thanks.
Okay, to give time to set up for the Planning Commission annual review, we will recess the regular session for 10 minutes. We are now in recess.
Okay.
We are back on air. So we are back in session. And we have our annual Planning Commission review. Planning Director is right there, Denny, and members of the Planning Commission. Thanks for coming in, you guys.
You're welcome.
The planning commissioners were dropping like flies this evening. I thought for a while we were going to have all of them, but yeah, both Kim and John Henry were both not feeling well.
Oh, wow.
I
There was a
appreciate
mention of
that
the
they stayed
plague.
away.
Thank you. Thank you for not infecting
And
us.
Greg was a little iffy from the start, so we're I guess he's always a little iffy, but
We were all trying to not
Greg,
say that.
in case you were watching.
The thing about
know Greg is
you'll
watching.
live right into that one.
All right.
You know he's going to watch.
Anyway, the Planning Commission met to talk about a work program back on October 8th, and one of the recommendations they made were some adjustments to the bylaws so that there would be a annual meeting with NDA leaders. And Kim Travis had wanted to do that for a while, and the commission at their last meeting
Did it?
a week ago, right? Did it, yep, and had a good turnout, I think. I wasn't there because I was at the Elk Rock, I was with all of you at the Elk Rock hearing. Any of you want to comment on how that went?
Well, yeah, just overall, I thought it was a really good interchange. Like you said, we had a really, really good turnout, and, there was kind of just, one theme that I heard from all the participants is, involve us, early, because if we don't, we get no say. That was kind of the overarching theme that I took away from the meeting. How about you guys?
I agree with that. It was a really robust discussion. I wish we could have gone on for longer and had it been, more interactive, but everybody got a chance to speak, and there was a theme, and it was that, there's, by the time land use applications show up to the NDAs, things are pretty much already a done deal. And so, it feels like there's not really the ability to engage or, redirect energy on a project towards something that's, more satisfying to the community. And getting involved earlier in the process, like at the pre-application stage, for the NDAs, being able to submit comments to that was something that was brought up, a couple times. And I brought it up also because it's something that, I think is, important. Get involved early in the process so that, you actually have the opportunity to affect the trajectory of something. And that's something that's really lacking from the process that we have here in the city now. And that was really the theme and one of the opportunities to, resolve, kind of the thematic challenge that was, really discussed.
Can I ask a question? I know Justin's not feeling well, so we said he could go, but I do actually have a legal question, so maybe Denny will just have to fill in.
Okay.
What opportunities, because I heard that, sort of at our earlier tonight too, and I guess, I think everybody in this room would love to see, as much public participation as you possibly can, but there are some restraints around, what you can force an applicant to do, in the land use. We have laws, right? and so, what kind of opportunities are there? And maybe it is a pre-application, type opportunity versus, once an application is there are some, that we have to follow whatever is in our ordinances.
Well, once we have a pre-application conference and create pre-application notes, they're public documents. We don't advertise them historically, primarily because there's some, often those projects go away, so they don't always
turn into
appear.
An application.
Yeah, and things sometimes change a lot between the pre-application stage and the actual application stage. So it's hard to say, to get everybody excited about projects that aren't real. The developer is just trying to learn what the requirements are and what the issues might be. We've been talking about this a little bit internally in the last week since this happened, and thinking about actually doing a posting up on the website, much like we have with our actual applications about pre-app notes. But also try to figure out a way to, I don't know, classify them in some way as, which are sort of exploratory, which are more realistic, but that's some judgment on our part. I don't know how we would do that. I don't think there's a legal issue once somebody has applied, it's made that pre-application. I think it's public info.
Yeah, I mean, I think the request is really more along, the lines of, somehow engaging, the potential applicant with the community is what I'm hearing.
Well, and you guys...
We can do that.
You guys encourage them to go to the NDA often, and is that typically happening after the applications come in or actually before the applications?
No, I think it usually happens after a pre-application, before an application. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Denny, is it a recommendation or a requirement? I know
it's a recommendation.
other jurisdictions make that a requirement.
Yeah.
During a pre-application phase.
Correct. A requirement of the land use package.
And again, it's kind of like, what's the threshold for that? Sometimes they're pretty minor projects. So it's something we can explore a little bit more, though, for sure. That's a good way of engaging the community by having the applicant go out.
Denny, my historical perspective is certainly not as long as many in this room, but, of the projects that I have seen over the past year, anything that was, a significant project, it seemed like the developer always went to the NDA. I can't think of one where they didn't.
Yeah.
So they've taken those recommendations and that kind of thing. But I agree, you can spin people up for nothing, and so I think that's one of the concerns. But it's people just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think most of the projects that have been fairly big projects have gone to the NDAs before they have submitted an application. Mm-hmm. And we do encourage them to do that because, they're going to try to create some goodwill by doing that. Yeah.
I think one of the other things related to that communication piece is how the city is communicating about those things. So we've also heard in comments about how it's being advertised in the pilot or how it's on the website or how any of that information during the process is being, broadcast to the public. And I think some folks are feeling like just clear, transparent information about what is going on across a number of different avenues where people might find information from the city is really important and makes them feel, included in the process.
Yeah. So, I think we're trying to figure out a way to make sure we get more information out early. We've heard the message, and the quickest answer might be to do this listing of pre-app notes, and then to try to make over the longer term, make sure that we've got maybe a code requirement or procedural requirement that major developments at least go out to the neighborhood. So we can work on that. I think that there wasn't anything that happened with the NDA meeting that changed the recommendation to put that into your bylaws. Is that correct?
No, I think everyone was for it. I think that the folks there thought it was useful and everything like that. I will tell you that there was some discussion about taking it even further, and that that brings in the head of the NDAs and the land use chairman and that kind of thing. And we actually had a discussion about, all too often, the people here kind of are viewed by many as these remote people in City Hall that, can be looked at like, what do they know about my neighborhood? There's some skepticism out there. And so one of the things that Kim has talked to all the commissioners about is that for the commissioners to go out to, and visit the NDA meetings. And so some of us obviously attend our own NDA meetings regularly. I went to one outside of my NDA when we were briefing them on the CPAC and that kind of thing. But that puts real people, in front of a wider audience, and we become more real rather than people on YouTube or whatever, which I think is good. You'd have that personal sort of connection and that kind of thing. So I think that's something that Kim wants to pursue amongst the commissioners.
Yeah, I try to go to, I didn't do it in 2019, I have to admit, but I try to go to every NDA once a year. And I find it really useful for me, for my education about what is going on or what they are interested in and stuff, but it also gives them, And so I definitely encourage to the amount that you can do it, to do it, for sure.
And I think that that's something that I've been aware of for council as well, and I have a concern that maybe we all need to talk about recommitting ourselves to that. I've been going to the NDA meetings. I started November. I'm trying to knock out one a month at least, and you learn so much, and you connect with people that in a totally different way. So I think it has a lot of merit.
You guys ready to shift gears?
Yeah.
The other item on the Planning Commission's October 8th meeting agenda was the work program for planning and the Planning Commission. And Council's talked about this a little bit as it relates to the comprehensive plan. The staff report included a long list of projects, more than a one-year work program, a multiple-year work program that addresses a lot of the things that have been identified in the comprehensive plan update process. And I think one of the goals tonight was to just kind of make sure everybody's on the same page about what priorities are and where we ought to focus. What we've heard, at least from the council, staff has heard, is a need to emphasize the housing-related policies and get to a point where we are implementing those issues. So that is kind of the one thing that I think we're expecting to work on next year. And if there's anybody that objects to that and thinks something else is more important, I would hope that would get raised tonight. The other things that were in the staff report talk about some of the things that are needed to sort of complete the comp plan process. There are some things that, because we're trying to do that in a 2-year time frame, that we didn't do. One was the transportation systems plan update. Another was completing some aspects of the public facilities plan and a couple of inventory updates. So those are still on our list, but not quite as pressing. The TSP is an important piece, but it's also a really involved piece. And I have a little bit of concern about trying to do the housing update and the TSP at the same time.
Can I just, Denny, real fast, 2 pieces on what you just said. We also at the council talked about adding the tree component to the discussions around housing, so making sure that we were talking about the private property.
And parking,
tree
right?
code.
Wasn't it the 3?
And the parking
Yeah.
code. So it's actually a 3-legged stool that council gave direction to staff on. And then the only other thing that I wanted to add was when Denny says it's more than a year, we've been projecting about 4 to 5 years worth of work that's in this list. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that we're talking about a significant amount of time.
I told when in recruiting members of the CPAC last night for the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, I'll talk about this in a minute, I told them all a little more than a year. So,
Denny, a lot more than
but this is an aside. I'm going to jump from my script here. But what the council will have before them on the 7th of January is a staff report recommending that we form a comprehensive plan implementation committee that would involve one member of the Planning Commission, one member of the council, up to 6 members of the existing CPAC, and up the 6 new members, plus some rotating subject matter experts. That's the idea, anyway. And we're trying to form that in basically by March, just so that we can start in on the housing stuff. So let me go back to my program here. A couple of the other things that were important were neighborhood hubs and trying to move that forward. That's going to require some zoning amendments in the commercial area. Kind of cleaning up some of the ancillary documents, including the town center plan, which is this 1997 document that we've got that just kind of sits there and has been replaced by the Central Milwaukie plan and the downtown plan, but it was never deleted. But there's a couple other things in there that we need to carry forward that have not happened. Institutions, parks, school zone, and then some updates to the Willamette Greenway. Those are some things that are all needed to sort of implement the comp plan. There are a couple of other planning things that are happening right now that are going to come forward. One is engineering worked with the Department of Land Conservation and Development to look at the Title 18 floodplain regs to make them more consistent with FEMA requirements. So we have a draft of our floodplain requirements that basically bring them up to current standards. But I want to note that there's a gap between those, what those standards would be and sort of what our policy direction has been recently. So we need to, what I think we're going to want to do at some point in the future is do some sort of a study session or work session on that. But that's ready to go, and we had, it's ready to be talked about anyway. We've got a grant from DLCD, Department of Land Conservation and Development, Transportation Growth Management Program, to do a study of the connection between 29th Avenue and Monroe. So trying to connect those two greenways and try to get that done before we see an application from the Murphy site, because we want to make sure we've got the bike connection right for that area. So that's, we're working up a scope right now that we're going to send back to the state, and they will either approve it or not approve it. But it includes stakeholder meetings with the property owners and community meetings as well.
I assume meeting with the railroad as well.
I'm sorry?
Is the railroad somehow
The railroad's in there, yes. We have a couple other things, like the DLC has been working on the downtown design guidelines for a long time, and we need to bring those forward. So that's another priority. So those are the ones I wanted to highlight. If there's a few other things on that list, but I'm curious to see if everybody's sort of aligned in the same area or not.
Denny, I'm particularly interested in the alignment of the floodway and the FEMA requirements. So what I think I heard you say and what I thought I read was we're just trying to bring ourselves up to the FEMA standards.
Well, to explain, the Department of Land Conservation and Development got a grant from FEMA to work with jurisdictions across the state to evaluate their floodplain code requirements. Okay. So DLCD contacted us and said, we'd like to work with you and review your code and figure out what you need to do to bring it up to standards. So we've got this set of proposed code amendments to Title 18, which the engineering department administers, but they don't go as far as what one of our suggested comp plan policies, how far they go, and they don't go as far as both the Planning Commission and the council wanted to take the Elk Rock Island project. So we need to do some resolution of that before we go back to the state and say, this is the package we want to adopt. We need to make
Elk
sure.
Rock and Rusk Road.
And Rusk Road, right. So we need to be clear about what it is we want before we take it to the next step.
We probably can't do that till Elk Rock's, like, decided and...
Well, their concept pretty much.
I just wanted to make sure there's a mechanism for us to go beyond what is in the FEMA, floodplains, which is, quite frankly, clearly inadequate.
30 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we have some avenues to do that, because I just don't want to get to the point where, where we are with what FEMA has, ink in their current standard, because it's just not good enough.
Yeah. Well, the upgraded set of code standards won't be good enough.
And there are cities around the country who are doing just that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Other priorities?
Well, I'll second the downtown design standards. I think that's something that we can knock out pretty quickly. It's really far along, and I feel like I haven't been to any of the DLC meetings for a few months, but even a few months ago, it felt like we were at a really solid place working through the last set of design components, and so that's something that is. Based on my tracking of it, it's really consistent with the comp plan policies that are forthcoming, and so I don't feel like it's going to, require the second look in the light of the new comp plan policies. I think it, is something that we can really. I see it as low-hanging fruit. I think that we can get that done and have the downtown design guidelines and standards in place for any new downtown development next year, and then the housing is the other big one. I really think that, especially with regard to, the mandatory things like, duplexes, that we should be, looking at fast tracking, implementation of, or permitting duplexes on, single-family lots. It's something that is going to be required, so let's just do it. It's, we have a housing emergency. Let's treat it like an emergency and, actually follow through on trying to do something, meaningful about it. And then, obviously there's going to be more consideration, there's more flexibility with how we implement the standards for triplexes and quadplexes and, garden apartments and clustered dwellings. And so that will take longer, obviously, to work through, but duplexes is, just have to do it. And so I think that that's something that we can do, on a relatively accelerated timeline compared to the other. And that would really kind of, I think, put a little bit of, action behind, the declaration that, we are in a housing emergency and we want to do something about it. Well, here's something that we have to do about it, and it's not a whole lot of flexibility in how we choose to implement it. And so I think that we should try to get that in place as quickly as possible.
I will just say, though, with rulemaking, I think it is important that our staff make sure that, that they're following along with where the rules are headed on that, so that we're not spending and wasting time on anything that's not going to pass muster. So I think that that's just really, really important to keep in mind, that it's not so cut and dry yet because the rules actually haven't been written yet. So we just need to make sure that we're tracking alongside of that. But I know that our staff are really, really, close with the staff at the state and understanding where that's headed and, the schedule, at least for those meetings and when those deadlines are. So that's very transparent. I mean, you can see what that schedule is and know when the deadlines will be for those rules. So, but I think that will dictate the schedule a little bit, I mean, it kind of depends on where your conversation is headed, I think. But certainly if if the proposal is seeming maybe a little bit less ambitious than what the state is going toward, then that might be where you find yourself in misalignment.
Council's also asked us to take a very robust engagement strategy with this, and just to make sure that we do the due process with the community. We've heard a lot already. We'd like to continue to hear it, and we'd like to make sure we do this the way that fits with the people of Milwaukie as much as possible.
And that said, you're totally right that we're in a state of emergency for housing, and I know for a fact that we have developers that are ready to build cottage clusters right now today. So the more we can get our process moving and finished, the sooner we're going to get some of this market-built affordable housing in place. And I don't want to miss opportunities by having some economic downturn happen and banks stop loaning, and so speed is of the essence, along with good outreach.
Well, I do think there's a question there, and I kind of raised this question several months ago, as to, do we do it all at once, or is there some low-hanging fruit? And I guess Joseph's suggesting that duplexes are the low-hanging fruit, and that maybe there are some things we could do quicker while we're working on, because I do think the cottage cluster is very complex and needs a lot of attention and a lot of discussion. But there are some things that are maybe lower-hanging fruit that we could move faster in a package. But I got the sense that staff did not want to separate it all out.
I think the bigger thing is just making sure that we're transparently talking about this with everybody and giving them a chance to make comment. And we're going to be running town hall meetings and running engagement throughout the entire process. And so there may be packages that we can bring forward once we've gone through those bigger processes. But I just caution everyone from believing that this is going to be super fast if we are being authentic in that engagement.
And I would just say, even yesterday's rulemaking discussion, not everyone agrees what a duplex is, believe it or not. So, even the definition of a duplex has not been established. So that's where I agree with you, and you and I might think we have a similar definition of a duplex. But you ask the people around the room, and you find out that we don't. So, yeah. I don't want to slow things down for sure, but I can tell you if we get it wrong and all of a sudden we have to redo it, and there are a lot of hurt feelings around, well, you told us this, and now it's that.
Or she had a developer that starts to invest. And we get
that
sued
too.
Because we're saying, oh, wait, no, we can't do that thing that we said we could do. Yeah.
I don't know if we can. Wouldn't want them to be investing towards something that can't.
So I'm hearing that I think this coming year is pretty clearly move the bar on housing. Was there any, and the tree code piece is also a really big lift. And this is tree protection on private property, not what the council will see probably earlier in that is an update to the tree protection on public property.
Sure.
I think Peter has that closer and ready to go. But the private property piece is something that will come back through the planning commission first to get to the council.
Well, and one of my understandings was that during the Planning Commission's discussion about the ADU component of the code that we just adopted out of the state, there was some discussion about parking in that as well. And so part of us pairing the parking component with this actually stems from that conversation of making sure that we're having an authentic conversation around parking and parking requirements as we're talking about these additional types of housing. So we're trying to make sure that nobody feels like there was a hidden ball, right? We're having the open conversation from the beginning, but parking is always a heated topic, and so that's part of what we're also trying to make sure we have time for, is to have that real conversation.
Okay, that's easy. I think that I do feel like there should be a commitment to get the downtown design standards moving, because it's just been hanging at DLC for so long, and partly it's just been a lack of staff time to take it to the next step. And there is some consulting money in our budget that we didn't spend on some of the inventory work, I'm so sorry, that I think I'd like to take and apply to to get that part moving. Yeah. And
You're here. You're going to have to start another committee to redraft
well, the good part is that
updates to the
that Lauren's on Planning Commission now, so the work that she did on the DLC is going to be understandable. And Joseph went to a whole bunch of DLC meetings as a planning commissioner, as the Planning Commission liaison for that work. So I feel like we're at a really good place to get it to the point where we can move it through the commission and have something for the council to consider.
Awesome.
So those would be, those may be our biggest items.
Good items.
And this meeting, this delayed meeting for the commissioners, this is the punishment for having no meeting next week.
bah humbug.
Merry Christmas.
I don't think it worked.
So to go back to your, the thing about meeting with the NDAs, I mean, if you want to amend the bylaws, great, but I mean, I don't know that you have to have a bylaws amendment to do that meeting. You didn't have it before you did it last week, so.
Well, but it would help remind us that we're supposed to do it. I mean, that's probably the biggest issue.
Yeah.
It's easy to drift past some of those things, like the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the DLC that's supposed to happen, and we often sometimes drift by that one.
So we'll get the modified version?
Yeah,
The bylaws, we can approve those.
I'll run it through the Planning Commission and then probably bring it to council as a consent agenda item. I think you guys have to review them as well, yeah.
So since you're going to be touching that, or maybe we wanted to go through a lot more process before that, but the consideration of the Planning Commission being the, and I'm forgetting what the new fancy
CIAC.
phrase is, yes.
Yeah.
The what?
The CIAC, the
Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Goal 1 at the state level, statewide planning goals, has a requirement that each jurisdiction have a CIAC to evaluate how well you are involving the public in planning issues. And what the comp plan policies suggest, that set of policies that we did in the first batch, identified the Planning Commission, that the Planning Commission should sit as the CIAC and put that hat on periodically, a couple times a year to do that work. There is a proposal that you will also see in the packet of recommendations, or not in the recommendations, but in the citizens group, the RIP group has proposed that be a standalone body. The CPAC, when it did its set of recommendations, had a long discussion about that and basically ended up with the recommendation that the Planning Commission do it. It didn't get discussed nearly as much, I think, at the Planning Commission level or at the council level when that came up through the process. But we ended up just having concerns about the amount of additional staff time and effort that would go into staffing a separate committee as opposed to the Planning Commission convening a meeting as that group.
I'm assuming some of the conversation, or maybe you should tell us, what were some of the points made about it being a separate entity.
You will see that those recommendations, that package of recommendations from the RIP group at your hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll probably testify to that too. So, I mean, there are good reasons to do it as a standalone body. It's just whether you have the capacity to do it.
So I also think not just capacity, the Planning Commission is the entity that probably has the most back and forth with the public in any case.
Unbiased.
Just on a regular basis. And in my opinion, they're going to be more attuned to whether the public is feeling heard, feeling engaged, than some committee that meets twice a year that otherwise isn't engaging with the public. Other than their circle of friends or whoever they're talking to, right? They don't have a place, a moment where they're engaging with all of the public on a regular basis. So to me, it feels like you're setting up a committee that's going to be even more out of touch with what the sort of vibe of the citizens or the residents is than the Planning Commission would be. So,
and one thing I would recommend for the commission is to watch the council's study session from last week.
Yeah.
Because our assistant city manager made a presentation about the engagement goal and kind of what activities the city is taking on to promote engagement. And I think one of the really interesting proposals is to do some training of staff and of our different committees and commissions, especially the Planning Commission, in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion concepts. So sometime in the next year, we're going to arrange some training for the commission so that it's kind of raising everybody's awareness.
My sense right now where I sit today is that it makes a lot more sense to improve on what we have in place, as opposed to, starting from scratch. I think the Planning Commission, in its role and in its responsibilities to, hear all of the things, a lot of what the city does, a lot of the, policymaking kind of channels its way through the Planning Commission, before it gets to us. And I think, along with our, like you just said, that training that we'll all receive too, and that staff is engaging in, and all of these ideas to improve the, the public outreach. I think, and it speaks a lot that you're already talking about these issues on the Planning Commission and already taking steps, to say, okay, we need to better engage, with the community. I think to me that just, lands on my ears as, of course. That makes a lot of sense. This is already a group that's thinking along those lines. They're already not only engaging with the public, but they already have the expertise that comes along with, sitting in this seat and hearing and reading the thousands and 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 thousands of pages that you all read every year that, like you say, a committee of people who meet twice a year absolutely will not.
And I really appreciate how Denny spoke about Kelly's work, so thank you for that. There's also some work we're doing with IAP2, which is the International Association of Public Participation Groups. So we are doing some training around just what are the levels of engagement that should be brought forward depending on the type of issue. So it might be really helpful for all of you to also get the vernacular that we're helping the rest of our teams learn. Mary in the planning department is on our public engagement team now. We've created an internal team to really look at what best practices in the United States, actually in the world, and better us. So there may be a time when we do both DEI work and engagement work just to help you hear from us what we're working on, but also learn the best practices in order to execute your jobs better.
So I wasn't going to bring this up, but this actually came up at the meeting with the NDA, leaders when we discussed this a bit, and there were when it was brought up, it was more along the lines of, we think there should be a dedicated group of people who are actually experts, not just exposed to a great volume of input from the community, but actually experts at engagement and involvement and passionate about it, and that take their time to to learn and further, their understanding in outreach with the community. Because our work on the Planning Commission is really limited to land use issues, and community outreach is a broad, set of, it's disciplines that cross more than just land use policy. It's, and so there's a whole host of community engagement, disciplines and skills that, we probably on the Planning Commission, may never come into possession of one person on the commission who is truly expert in these community outreach disciplines. And I actually remember, it was before I think either of Commissioner Massey or Commissioner Loosevelt were on the commission when we actually talked about these in Block 1. But the Planning Commission actually did discuss this quite a bit, and our recommendation was to have a dedicated committee of people who were really into outreach. And then when things came back to us, that had been crossed out and replaced with, we were going to be that. So, that's, and maybe that's okay for what DLCD expects from us. But, really, if we were taking community engagement seriously, and trying to really, as a city, have a across the board community engagement, as a strength, then I think that, I appreciate what you were mentioning about, what Mary's doing. And I think we need people who are like that and really are seeking that out on their own, volunteering for the city. And maybe it's more than twice a year. But people who are really passionate about this, I think you get them around the table and talking about what can really be done, and you're going to get a lot further than what you're going to get out of people that get together to review land use applications and code amendments. So.
Can I ask a really quick question? Is there a concern that because here's my concern about another committee. It's not just related to staffing a committee like that, but it's also it's also actually making sure that there is a commitment, that there is a committee that can commit to, because it would have to be more than twice a year, or it could not that wouldn't work. You can't evaluate, you can't establish it, because it's not just a relationship with, as the mayor said, the people that, or even in the NDAs, because we all know that our NDA meetings, are not as well attended as they could be. So it really, to me, there's some maybe hybrid approach that is sort of like kind of bubbling in my mind here, because I just don't think a standalone new committee that doesn't have established, meeting times, on the calendar, doesn't have the relationship with the staff, that the Planning Commission does, or, if something grows out of that, I think that that's maybe a different approach that we should consider. But I just, standalone, start over, doesn't get off the ground the way people think it will.
Well, I tend to agree with that, and I guess I would encourage, like Denny said, to listen to Kelly's presentation about what the different pieces of the community engagement work. I think it's possible that Kelly will reach a point at some point where she thinks, okay, we need a task force for a limited question or something, rather than some future unending committee, but we need a task force to help us figure out X question. I think there are feedback loops of that she's going down, that she's gathering, that may lead to the need for some kind of short-term committee or task force, but not necessarily an ongoing committee or task force. So, I just think, we need to let that process go through its course and see what comes of it.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate that the outcome of this is going to be that Planning Commission has this whole big new job that goes on its shoulders in addition to handling land use applications. I think that the conversation we're having about this community engagement goal for the city is that the whole city is stepping up, and that means those of us on council, that may mean the planning commission, it definitely means staff, and it's the integrated approach that all of us take to that in figuring out how we move forward that's important. We're not at the point right now, I don't think, where we can seriously entertain any particular mechanism, because I don't know enough. I need to have that training myself. I need to have those conversations myself. You all need to have those conversations. So we don't, I love that we're all excited and that the community is excited about this goal, but it takes time for us to get ramped up to where we can make meaningful, informed decisions about these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, that staff, embraced that goal and really sort of like turned the mirror on themselves. And I also appreciate that that's sort of, where maybe, some of the time delay, growing pain might be surfacing. But I think that was the right way to go.
Yeah.
And I do think let's not necessarily mix apples and oranges with what the CIAC is, because it's a certain function under the land use.
Right.
The state land use planning rules.
But they're very complementary.
And they are complementary, but it's not, that is one piece of what the city's
Right. Yeah.
doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the concept that, marrying up these two functions in the Planning Commission has a lot of efficiencies, I think, that have been described. I am a little bit concerned, I think Lauren mentioned it, is that I would be a little bit concerned that there'd be a perception that, well, they're commissioners, they're not really citizens, they're not really, well, I know it's
high-paid commissioners.
right. I think there is the potential for a perception of us and them and but I understand the efficiencies, and so that's why I kind of I don't know what the hybrid model is, but there may be some value there.
Maybe hybrid was the wrong word.
I actually like the word hybrid.
Outgrowth, maybe.
But I think that when you're talking about citizen engagement, I think that there's so many, organizations, entities, commissions, whatever you want to call it, who really need to have that as a component of what they do. I mean, I think it's much better if you have that built in rather than bolted on. So I don't have an answer, but I can kind of see, both options. We need to noodle it a little bit over the holidays, I think, and maybe we'll come to some eureka moment. Yeah.
That's a great point. I think all of our committees, sort of.
Yeah.
That is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. That all of our committees are citizens' committees, including the five of us that sit up here.
Yeah.
Right? We're just citizens doing a different task.
Right.
And the more of us that are trained and the more of us that are engaged in that, the better it's going to be. I think that is the right.
And I'll end with this, is that I've lived in a lot of places. Milwaukie does a pretty good job of citizen engagement. So we can improve it, but it's not all bad. Yeah.
Since we've been talking about noodling concepts for the next little bit, the council just added 2 youth board members to 7 of our boards and committees. We're going to be filling those seats in February and actually having those students start later in the year. But it is one of those places where a lot of cities create a youth board where they can take an issue. The youth talk about it, they may give feedback, but the reality is it's often put off to the side. And we're trying to avoid that too. So part of our intentionality here is that we actually have youth participating in the actual decision making and having it integrated into every committee where we can. If that helps at all, I think that what I may be hearing from you as you're talking about this, Commissioner, is that it may not be enough for us to do engagement work with you. It may be that we actually need to dedicate some time with all of our boards and commissions. We're looking at a leadership program, not leadership, that's the wrong word, a consortium, bringing everybody together in the new year to talk about the similarities of the boards and help do some general training. And it may be that that's the right place to do it, so that every committee is really getting that training around engagement and also around some of the DEI work we're trying to do for the community. Yeah, thanks.
So I guess maybe the hybrid model might be that for purposes of DLCD, you say that it's the planning commission, but in reality, you create kind of a task force where people from the planning commission and other committees and boards and councils from the city would actually get together. Maybe it is twice a year, but we're at least also involved in other functions more than twice a year that involve the city and involve the public, and that would. That would allow the planning commissioners to bring their personal, experience from interacting with the public on the land use issues into that group and say, here's what we're hearing, and, maybe you need to make the website better, or maybe you need to make the applications more accessible, whatever. But then somebody from another committee comes in and says, maybe the same thing about the website, but for their subject matter. And then we say, oh, well, maybe we need to do something with the website. And, and then you have a subject matter expert in there for outreach. And they say, well, here's, some things to consider for that. And so that might be the hybrid model, is where you leverage the volunteer power that you already have available to you to bring it together and have specialized discussions on this kind of, specialty subject matter.
All righty. Anything else? Anybody?
No.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Thanks, you guys, for
Thanks for doing the amazing job that you guys have been doing.
Gosh, yeah.
Very proud of.
Oh, wait.
What?
Sorry, I hate ending on a down note.
Oh, no.
But I'm just going to issue my personal plea. Well, maybe I shouldn't do it until applications are done. You recently had a case where you short-circuited your deliberation by only denying on one or two bases. Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
On my recommendation.
Yeah. Well, I did watch the tape. I didn't see that, but I think, we count on. And I spent 9 years on the Planning Commission. I mean, I know, sometimes those things go on and they really take a life of their own. But, I mean, we count on you to have those deliberations and to have those discussions with the public. And if you don't do it, then it, kind of shifts to us to have to do it if, so, yeah, please.
I do.
Is it
Yeah, it's one that's still working its way through
It's going to,
process.
let's stop talking about this. Let's talk about this.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
All righty. And I think that brings us to, yes, to you.
Oh, we're not done, are we?
Council reports, yes?
Safe and happy and wonderful New Year.
Join us this Saturday, December 21st, from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. for the annual Winter Solstice and Christmas Ships viewing event at Milwaukie Bay Park. The event will once again include delicious food, fires to gather around, a beer garden, and of course the combined fleet of the Christmas Ships Parade. This year you can also sing along with the Dickens carolers from 5:30 to 6:30 as they wander around the park singing a mix of holiday tunes. Keep in mind that Milwaukie Bay Park is closed to all vehicles for the event, so if you drive, you will need to park downtown. No fire spinners at this one?
I'm hoping not.
You're hoping to leave some room for possibility.
The MAX stations at Park Avenue or Johnson Creek.
Excellent choice, yes. Very short walk from the MAX station here in downtown. All right. Next, bring your used Christmas tree to North Clackamas Watersheds Council on Saturday, January 4th, and they will turn it into salmon habitat. for only $10. All proceeds benefit the work that they do to protect, I'm fairly certain that's protect our local watersheds.
And they will be doing that at Spring Park in one of our parks, so, yeah.
The collection will be held at North Clackamas Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Join the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District in pulling invasive English ivy, planting native plants, and improving upland forest habitat at the Homewood Park Habitat Enhancement Volunteer Event on Saturday, January 11th from 9 a.m. to noon. Tools, gloves, and refreshments will be provided. The grand opening of the new Letting Library at its original location on 21st Avenue is scheduled for Saturday, January 11th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. with a ribbon cutting at 10 a.m. Activities will occur all day, so be sure to put it on your calendar and join the festivities. The Letting Library and Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee are delighted to sponsor a William Stafford birthday celebration on Saturday, January 11th from 2 to 4 p.m. at St. John the Episcopal Church downtown. All are welcome to attend. Featured readers have not been announced. Join the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and other volunteers in improving habitats at Spring Park and Elk Rock Island on Saturday, January 25th from 9 a.m. till noon. Tools, gloves, and refreshments will be provided. For more information about each of these events and others, please visit the city's homepage at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. And I keep getting these things from ODOT, so I'm going to see if I can do
Oh, yeah.
Reader's Digest version. Oregon 212 improvements from I-205 to US 26. Construction starts in early December. This project improves Oregon 212 from Interstate 205 to US 226 through Damascus and Boring. Traffic delays and congestion are expected in the project area. There is a project website, which is www.or212improvements.org.
I wanted to add to this list just, they're not until mid and late January, but just to get them on people's radar screens, 2 of our SAFE programs, SAFE projects will be having open houses. The Linwood one, which we saw recently, and it looks amazing. They're having their open house on Wednesday, January 15th in the evening at the school, and the 43rd Avenue is having theirs on Wednesday, January 29th at the evening, also at Llewellyn Elementary School. So those are both really great projects I'm excited to see moving forward, and just want to make sure people know that they're coming up.
Anything else? Nothing? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.